It's like
But
you look back on it, and Valky was only in place with the old Cascade rule and legal in modern for what, like 2 weeks or something, but it felt like an absolute eternity.
yeah, it is kind of crazy how little time it feels like there's been, but it really hasn't been that much time, right? It's kind of wild, is how I would put it.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, sometimes you get decks emerging late-ish in a format. So, like the mutate deck in standard would be a good example of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But with this, it's Blue Red Delver was already the best deck before, by a decent margin, I think,
Mm,
before MH2, um, or some form of Delver at least. And so,
sure,
I
right.
think a lot of the discussions around, oh, is Ragavan the problem? Is whatever the problem need to be
Hmm.
looked at in that light? But people just took the busted deck and added the new busted cards to it, and it's even more busted. So I don't know. This one did not take a genius to figure out, honestly.
Yeah, let's just go over the deck list. Like you said, people were playing Blue Red Delver before the ban, and frankly, I think it wasn't as good as this version. Um, so last, I mean, this Legacy Showcase was frankly supposed to be played before
Yes.
MH2 came out. However, due to server issues, it got pushed a week. Lo and behold, that week made all the difference because you and Ari predicted it in your podcast. Modern Horizons 2 seismic shift in multiple formats. In fact, I've looked at a lot of vintage deck lists, and this Urza Saga card, if you think it's ridiculous in other formats, you haven't lived life until it's made two constructs and fetched up a Black Lotus. I
Right.
just can't really, I can't fathom it,
I
honestly.
mean, even in vintage, where like you think about how that format is defined by so much of this free interaction, like Force of Will, Force of Negation, and then stuff like
Mhm.
Pyroblast, Flusterstorm, and so on. To have a card that is just two threats in one, and then a third card that dodges all of that, is just kind of obscene, frankly.
It's not very easy to counterspell Urza Saga. In fact, you literally cannot cast the spell counterspell in Urza Saga. A card that you and Ari were sort of high on in your podcast as well. Kind of just being laughably bad in the modern format now, I would put it
Yeah,
that way.
well, I kind of think Urza Saga fills a role in keeping the new interaction, at least in modern, in check. Where like, yeah, Grief and Ephemerate has not really seen much play in the first week,
Hmm.
hasn't lived up to that hype. But I think a big part of that is you can't Grief in Urza Saga, right? Like it's just so good against every normal means of interaction that you kind of have to do
Right.
something more proactive rather than reactive.
But enough about modern, enough about vintage. We're here to talk about how I arrived at this deck. Because frankly, this set coming out last Thursday and having to play a tournament on Sunday, you know how little time there is. Technically, if you were a true degen, you could have gotten most of the cards on last Wednesday, but they only came through treasure chests on last Wednesday. So you would have had to pay a literal arm and leg to get those cards. And frankly, it might not have even been possible even if you wanted to spend like thousands of dollars. Fair.
Yeah, the supply just isn't there, and
Yeah.
that's the context through which you have to look at basically all of the results from the first week,
Yeah.
across formats where the card supply is limited. So, we
Yep.
talk about the prevalence of Ragavan and Legacy, Urza
Hmm.
Saga in a lot of formats, and that is lower than what you'd expect the baseline
Yep.
to be, just because those cards are like still very difficult to actually source.
I'm not gonna lie. I might have bought a bunch of cards and sold them right back after the tournament ended. I'm not gonna lie. That may have happened with three Ragavans and three Regents. Uh, but enough joking aside. My route to getting to this deck list was okay. Like you said, my assumption was Blue Red Delver was obviously a decent deck beforehand, and it obviously improved. So my first thought was, okay, you know what was traditionally good versus Blue Red Delver? Tarmogoyf. Now, what actually happened in the first few games I watched and talked to other people with was they played Tarmogoyf. Their blue opponent would just wasteland them and play a 9/9 Regent in game one. And they're just like, why the fuck are we playing Tarmogoyf? Like, it doesn't even make any sense.
Right, you can play for 2 mana. You can play a flying Tarmogoyf that's bigger and pitches a forcible, and So yeah, it's almost like there's not really a compelling
Right.
reason to be in green at this point and make your mana worse. And you
Right.
look at this deck. Traditionally, one way that you could beat Delver was if they had a kind of mana light draw. You could
Mhm.
wasteland them into oblivion. This deck has 3 basic lands in it, and just gets to cast all of its spells very
Mhm.
easily. And it's actually kind of funny how laughably bad Blood Moon is against this deck now,
Yeah.
where even if you have turn one Blood Moon on the play before they have a chance to fetch a basic or whatever, it's like, okay, I'll cast Ragavan off my my Polluted Delta, that's a mountain, and then I'll hit you and I'll generate a treasure, and then I can cast my blue spells. It just doesn't really do anything anymore.
In fact, I've seen versions of this deck that actually sideboard Blood Moon. I don't really love doing it myself because it actually does lead to a lot of issues, but that is something you could hypothetically do.
Right, and if you think about some of the structural issues that previous iterations of Delver had, so when the deck had Arcanist and Oko, busted cards, Rug Delver by far best deck in that format as well. Even there, one way you could steal games from them sometimes is those 2 mana and 3 mana threats are actually kind of clunky in a format where, because of the Delver shell in large part and cards like Wasteland and Days, anything that's that expensive, so to speak, has to justify itself. In this deck, you have so many cheap threats. You've got Delver, Channeler, Ragavan, and then the Regent just costing 2 mana a lot of the time. It's and combine that with the basics as well. Like that kind of that hope of disrupting them just doesn't really exist in the same way here.
Yeah, a really good way of putting it that I just thought of right now is, I remember when people used to play Blue Zoo in Legacy. This is almost a Blue Zoo deck in a lot of ways now, because your mana curve is really condensed to 1 and 2 now. And really, I think the games where you don't have a 1-drop in your opener now, you should seriously consider mulliganing. So I think it's just better to play 1-drop than cantripping when you have enough 1-drops to consistently have in your opener. 11 is quite a large number.
You have a new Wild Nacatl that helps to fuel itself and provide card selection, get cards in your graveyard for Regent and so on, all at the same time, and then just gains flying on top of everything else after all is said and done. So let's talk about those new 1-drops quickly, because there was some debate over whether is Channeler better in the Delver Shell, is Ragavan better, and one answer is why not both, right? and that's what we see here.
It actually, even the actual winner, Tommy Ashton, A.K. Sanderson, a real MTGO killer if you don't know who he is. You know what? He just played the full 12, and honestly, I sort of regret not doing that, but we'll talk about why I didn't in a sec. There are a few reasons not to do that, but frankly, Channeler really impressed me. The only bad part is if you expect your opponents to have a bunch of blockers that can shut it down. Say Endurance, which we'll get to in a second, which is really not a card Channeler or Delver or Ragavan want to play against. I think generally speaking, the first Channelers and the first Ragavan are both very welcome, and if you play a mix of these, it's more likely you'll draw one of each, Some notes that I think are unusual if you don't play the format a lot, or if you... Okay, let's think about it this way. If you expect other people to come to the same conclusion that Blue Red Delver is the best deck, Game 1 Murktide Regent is basically unbeatable, unless if you're a maniac like me and decide to play a Power Blast in your main deck. I actually would contend it's not that maniacal because of all of the reasons we listed.
Yeah, is there any other removal spell that kind of does the same thing while being more generally applicable?
Not really. The next best option when I looked at was Vapor Snag. Dismember doesn't do it because generally the Regent will actually be bigger than Dismember, which is not really where you want to be. And Vapor Snag, I think, is just not that good. And the problem with Vapor Snag is I don't love it that much versus Uro, where Power Blast versus Uro is actually an all-star.
I did see one list had Mind Harness, which can take Dragon's Rage, Channeler, and Ragavan, but Mrs. Delver and crucially Mrs. Regent too. I don't know if about that one.
Yeah, I don't think you want to Mind Harness. Suspend Bounce Spell? Are you talking about the card literally Suspend? Because I don't think that card's very good, in this format.
Yeah, it can be decent with Regent, resetting it to a 3/3, and then, in theory, it's the same size for.
But then you still have to contend with the 3/3 flyer. You're down a card, and you've just downgraded 3 counters or whatever.
Yeah, it's still very bad. So it seems like once you get to that realization that Regent is just, ruling the skies in the mirror, then leaning into that card, at least in the main deck, is a good way to go. When people were trying to build around Channeler, the first thing your mind goes to is Mishra's Bauble, right?
Yep.
So it's a free spell, so you get the free Surveil, helps to get you towards Delirium, and then also with Murktide Regent, it can help that kind of turbo delve plan. I mean, you still some lists had it, but I think for the most part, people concluded that just wasn't really that necessary.
So I'm not gonna lie, I didn't get to play that many games, or in fact, I wish I'd played a few more. I would have changed a few things about my list. But the one thing I noticed is even without Mishra's Bauble in my deck, I had no issues with Delirium. And also Mishra's Bauble makes mulliganing really tough sometimes, which is something that I don't think is really said about in Modern. I think sometimes there are just hands you can't keep because you just have a bunch of baubles, you don't know what's going to happen. And like it does make your deck harder to play. The flip side is Bauble is obviously powerful with Channeler, but I think I would play Mishra's Bauble if I had Sprite Dragon in my deck, but you notice that there are no Sprite Dragons as well.
Yeah, once you have 11 or 12 1-mana threats, and then also the Regents, you just don't really have the need or the room for for more 2-mana threats. And when you think about how scary Sprite Dragon is, like the fact that that card is on the shopping block now is just highlights how ridiculous the show has become.
So a few more interesting questions that people might have is, well, why did you pick 1 Gutshot, 1 Forkbolt, 1 Preordain, and 3 Wastelands? Those are probably the most weird-looking numbers. A lot of people played 2 Forked Bolt, and I don't blame them for that. I think that's reasonable. But I think sometimes it's just nice to have a card that can gain you a massive amount of tempo instead of a potential 2-for-1. Because I don't know about other people. I was playing around opposing Forked Bolts, if possible, just by not deploying a second threat in the Delver mirrors. And a lot of times playing the second Delver, like 1 toughness threat, also exposes you to Daze. Card which some people are floating on the chopping block now. We'll get to that at the end of the discussion. I don't want to run into that one at the beginning. That's just a whole different beast on back. But Gutshot, at its core, you should not play this card unless you expect a lot of mirrors or elves, which I did in the winner's bracket. And I don't know what you think of that decision, Dom.
Yeah, I think I would maybe lean even more towards Gutshot, if anything, just because I think 2 of the best decks before MH2 were Delver and Elves. I think both of them gained the most from this set, so those 2 are even better now. And I don't actually know what the Elves matchup looks like, or if it was ever that positive. The Elves pilots will say one thing, maybe the Delver pilots will say something else. But when you have a card like that, it is so good against those decks, and then also against stuff like D&T, just sniping Mother of Runes or Thalia, that kind of thing. But also, with how even more compressed these mana curves are in the mirror now, being able to Gutshot the 1-drop and through days, right? On the first turn, you play your land, you Gutshot, and then you can afford to play your cantrip or something. Whereas if it's Forked Bolt, if they have, let's say, Ragavan, you try and bolt it, they daze it, that might just be game over on the spot there, so to speak. So I actually do like the Gutshots a lot, and then there's a lot of surprise, like triggering Channeler at instant speed, or just turboing out the Murktide Regent. I think that card, and Expressive Iteration too, which is a card maybe we should touch on. I think just having these free effects, and maybe they're not bauble, but just some kind of free effects, has a lot going for it.
Yeah, Iteration. Tommy chose to play 4 of that card, but let's talk about the mana base before I get to Iteration, which is one issue with Delver. If you want to play a compressed mana curve, you don't necessarily want to play 19 lands. Like, there are basically no 3-drops in this deck, unless if you count Regent. Iteration's a fake 3-drop, but, Wasteland doesn't really help cast someone either. There's a lot going on. Essentially, what I wanted to have happen was I wanted to play 18 lands and have 14 blue sources, and there's very few ways to do that if you want to get 3 basics in the deck. In fact, I think it has to look like this if you want to play Ion Island Mountain. Then you get to play your 8 fetches, which is about the right number for Brainstorm. Then 3 Volk, 3 Wasteland slot in naturally. So to get the 14th blue source and have 2 islands, you basically are committing to 3 Wasteland if you play only 18 lands.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a self-fulfilling thing as well, where if Delver is the most popular deck and all the Delver decks are moving in this direction, then the efficacy of Wasteland in the mirror just is substantially reduced. So at that point, you do become, I think, a little more exploitable when there's only 1 Force Negation in this list and only 3 Wastelands. So in theory, and you have to play a little bit more spot removal too.
Right.
So I do think you become a little worse against spell-based combo, let's say. But how much of that can you really expect, right?
And the flip side about that is, I think the spell based combo I expected to play against, really you do want Pyroblast against, and you
Yeah.
want something like the Artifact Hate was good versus my expected spell based combo matchups. Like I was planning on siding in Meltdown or a Braid versus those decks just to try to tag something like Wish Claw Talisman or Lotus Petal or Chrome Mox or something like that. It's not the ideal plan. Like you would much rather have Null Rod in those situations, but the issue is you talked about it, the Affinity deck that people played. There's really not a great way for a 3 Wasteland version of this deck to deal with 2 constructs. Um,
Right.
it actually does map out that Meltdown is basically the best thing you can do without playing some truly awkward cards that are not good in other matchups. Meltdown is like Echoing Ruin for Chalice of the Void. I will point that out. It's not
That's nice. Yeah.
yeah, like I thought about it, and the more and more I thought about it, I was convinced Meltdown was the correct card to play, even though people had Shattering Spree. The problem with Shattering Spree is, well, if you have Island Mountain out, Spree's not even that good. Like you have to basically not fetch any islands for Meltdown to be good, or for
Yeah. I,
for Shattering Spree to be better.
I know you've been a big advocate in the past for having at least one Norrod on your sideboard.
Yeah,
I guess Meltdown actually beats the board in a way that Norrod doesn't some of the time. Like if you
exactly.
preordain or ponder into it at a later date, you often much rather have the Meltdown than the Norrod there. But
Well,
also, I think against
yeah.
the combo decks, like the fact that you have 12 1-drops and you can play this even more aggressive game
Mhm.
now, I think goes a long way too. And Ragavan actually, like, I've seen some truly obscene screenshots of what that card has done. Like in the
Yes.
showcase, I was eliminated by. I was playing lands, and my Delver opponent hit me with Ragavan, flipped a life from the loam, and got back their wasteland and just wasted me out of the game. And it's like, well, okay, I guess that's a thing you can do. Or
Yeah.
against some combo decks, you can like
Yeah.
if they're like some kind of storm deck with duresses and thoughtseize and
Yep.
so on, then you can like turn that against them. The card is just kind of ridiculous, honestly, in those contexts.
So a few things to note about Ragman. I actually a lot of the preparation for this list was Bob Huang, a noted Delver aficionado, did tell me some things he noticed when testing. He actually said he thought Ragavan was overrated, but I think he just played a lot of against a lot of other like small creature decks. Like Ragavan's actually excellent in the Delver mirrors for the reasons you listed. Whereas like if you have it on the play backed by days and you waste them, the game is just almost over on the spot. Like it's just so hard to come back from that because the mana advantage. It's similar to how if you led with Deathrite, dazed them, and wasted them, they would also lose. It really has that same feeling to it. But versus a deck like Elves or say Death and Taxes, sometimes Ragavan's not at its best. So that's why I chose to play 3. Um,
And I think you would, if you had the space, you would
yeah.
probably want to board out the Ragavans against elves, let's say, right?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on how you expect the games to go. The problem is like the average card from the Elves deck doesn't really work very well in your deck. Is my problem with the card as well. Like so, and the other question is, does the mana advantage matter? And I don't think the games are really about mana advantage unless if you're what actually matters in the Elves matchup. I think is making like a 5/5 Regent on turn 2 if you can. I think that's literally the thing that
Yes.
matters. Which is not that easy. But let's get to expressive iteration. We've seen this in historic, standard, modern. It's just an absolute powerhouse. The one issue with it in Legacy, I think, is there's a really high bar to play a bunch of 2-drops in your deck, and let's call it days the format.
Yeah, it's. I think it is a good card, but I almost think the pendulum has swung like too far in the other direction now,
Yeah.
where people are singing its praises way too much.
Yep.
And if you have to kind of mess up your own sequencing in order to maximize your chances of a good iteration, then often you're losing some of the equity that you're meant to be gaining there.
Yeah, the real biggest issue I have with iteration, especially in these mirrors, is well, there's such a natural play pattern for it. If you have nothing better to do on turn 3, is to cast it first, try to hit a land, and try to play a spell off of it. Now, the real issue with that is Daze like completely messes that plan up 100% of the time. So I only chose to play 3 because it's a little bit clunky. Sometimes when you're on the draw in these mirrors, you don't actually have time to play it in time. But against say a deck like Bant Miracles or like Bug Midrange or something like that, it is really one of your best cards.
Hmm.
Also, one thing that happens in the post board dynamic is what actually happens in the post board games is similar to say mono red mirrors in the past and standard, where basically both decks have basically say 12 to 15 removal spells for the opposing threats. So what does that mean? It means it's basically going to become an attrition war, and whoever has the last card is probably going to win. Iteration, I think, is actually better in the post board games than it is in the pre board games in the.
I could believe that. I think that's a common dynamic where usually post sideboard and not even in the mirrors, just in general, players have more removal and more ways to kind of exchange cards and line up well against their opponent's cards. And so at that point, just having a draw to goes a longer way.
Yeah, and I think that about covers every single main deck slot. I'll cover the sideboard real quick. I chose to play Hydroblast because I think there was going to be a lot of blue-red Delver Mirrors, and that's just another removal spell. Plus, it's good for some fringe decks like Moon Stompy, even something like, I don't know, I would side it in versus like the Epic Storm probably to just try to tag, Burning Witch or something like that.
Yeah, Moonstompy did have quite a high win rate this weekend, despite the Blood Moon getting a lot worse in the face of Ragavan.
Well, but to counterpoint that is, look at how insane Chalice for One is versus the main deck of this deck.
Right, and that's why when I was messing around with the Affinity deck, I wanted to play a build that had Chalice because
I see.
You do actually get even more free wins with that card now.
Yeah, so Hydroblast, I think, great. Brazen Borrower, kind of just a catch-all, I don't know how to explain exactly. I don't really love main decking Brazen Borrower as much as other people, but I do recognize that it's a valuable card to have in a lot of post-board scenarios. Just like weird decks, like if you play against any Merit Lage deck, you'll be happy to have access to that. If you play against something like, I don't know, just name like a Chalice of the Void deck, I would also want it there.
Yeah.
It just does so much from one slot. I just chose not to main deck it because I think in the version of this deck, your mana is better spent on cheaper things.
That makes sense.
Submerge, Knight of the Reliquary is still a big problem for decks like these. I'm not gonna lie. If you play against uncounterable Reclaimers and Knights, you'll be glad to have something like Submerge on your sideboard, and it's still excellent in the semi-mirror when you play against Rogue. It's just Slaughter Pact for screen decks.
And Elves too, yeah, which always welcome to have the help there. Surgical Extraction as the graveyard hate of choice. Is that mainly for graveyard decks, or is it like back when Uro was more popular and you would it would be a pivotal part of that plan too?
So I watched, as I do, I just watched streams like almost nonstop and tried to gather data. Honorog was making quite a run with Bant Uro. Featuring 4 copies of Endurance in the 75. We'll get more to that later. It's a huge pain in the ass for a deck like this. But really, I don't think those decks can beat you, even with Endurance, if you just take out all of their Uros. Or at least it becomes a lot more awkward for them. Because I think if it's just down to Endurance, you can be like, alright, you have a 3/4, I'll make a 7/7 flyer. What's up? So I do want to attack Uro, and honestly, like in a deck like this, iterating into a surgical on turn 2 versus, say, a Life from the Limb deck is not an unreasonable thing to try to do in a lot of weird situations.
That makes sense. You did say that there were some changes that, having played the tournament, you would have made. What would those be? What would the new deck list look like?
I think it's probably just not... Well, I think especially in a more open field, you shouldn't main deck the Pyroblast. And I would definitely consider just playing the 4th Ragavan. I probably just would not main deck a Force of Negation by this point. But, if metagames ebb and wane, like they turn and twist, at some point it's going to be correct to get that Fawn 1 or 2 back into your main deck. But I think if you just expect a ton of mirrors, you can just axe the Fawn or put in your sideboard, play the 4th Ragavan, and, maybe axe his Preordain for another Gutshot or something like that.
Yeah, we could move to the point, I guess, where Force of Negation is a sideboard card, effectively, where, and I don't know how many copies, but in matchups where you want that effect, it's one of the best you can have. So that would make sense for sure.
So I'll just scroll over the next few sideboard cards. They're pretty obvious. Blazing Volley. I was citing it in the straight blue red mirrors. I don't like it that much versus Rug, generally speaking, especially since some of the Zoomers play to build with Young Pyromancer. Blazing Volley is just phenomenal versus that version of the deck, and honestly, I would advise it against playing Young Pyromancer right now. I think it's a huge trap. Um, it's really not what these mirrors are about, really. Uh, like between Forked Bolt and Gut Shot and even Blazing Volley postboard, what are you hoping to achieve with a Young Pyromancer that like card draw spells or Regent doesn't do better?
Also, all of the threats other than Ragavan either have flying or gain it eventually, and so you're
Mm-hmm.
not even gumming up the ground on defense. You have to play offense with that card, and it's just not a very aggressively costed card. Compared to
Yep.
like the Channeler, for example.
And with all of the words I've said about Regent, and even like Luis admitting that playing only one Regent in his version of the deck was a huge mistake, I would expect other people to have figured out that Regent was really good. So I just wanted 4 Power Blasts in my 75. No questions asked. Also want 4 Power Blasts versus Uro decks. So it if you are inbreeding for Blue Mirrors and you don't have 4 Power Blasts in your 75, you better have a very good reason for that.
Yeah, that's step one, and then
Mm-hmm.
the secondary stuff can fill itself in for sure. And then I guess Sulfuric Vortex also good against Uro. Don't have Clothis in in straight blue red, so gotta make do.
Yeah, I have a lot of words to say about both Sulfuric Vortex versus Clothis versus what's actually going on. I'll get to that in a sec. A Braid for the Affinity deck for Chalice decks is for Death and Tax. I think you need one Abrade at least somewhere in these sorts of decks. Um, Meltdown covers all of the things I mentioned, and I think Grafdigger's Cage is excellent in these decks now that you don't have Dread Hurricanist in your deck. Like, I don't know about you, it's just literally sort of the perfect card for this deck. It only costs 1 mana. It it does a lot for very little cost. It lets you play a Protect the Queen game versus a deck like Elves, which might be harder than normal. Like if you just protect the cage and keep Shepherd off the field, then you're in much better shape.
Yeah, I think it gets like I know Newton's list, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of lists tend to cut natural order post board against
Yeah.
elves. I don't know how I feel about that, but at that point, Cage is only really tagging Zenith and then I guess
Fetching
fetching
Dryad.
Dryad Arbor. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it does have some broad applications, definitely.
All right. So I'll talk about this Sulfuric Vortex. Obviously, I would love to play Clothis, but the problem is I didn't want to devote a sideboard slot to playing Trop for just one card or potentially two, and I also didn't want to put the Trop in my main deck because it's really just it's a island that can be wastelanded. So I just decided not to bother with Clothis. So I play Sulfuric Vortex. Now the real issue with Sulfuric Vortex is it's a much worse card than Clothis. First off, it can just be like killed up by like straight disenchant or like Hydroblast or something like that. But the other flip side and the other thing that I noticed was the Bant decks, they can actually remove Clothis a lot easier now with a new printing from Modern Horizons 2. I believe the name of the card is Prismatic Ending.
Yes.
Yeah, that card looked really good when I watched Underark play it. It looks really good in Modern too, like to be quite fair. And honestly, if your Colossus is no longer unkillable, that sort of subtracts a lot of the attractiveness to splashing green in this deck period for me anyways. So that's another reason to just not play green, I think. A,
Yeah.
Tarmogoyf's not great. B, if your Colossus is no longer unkillable, then like what's even the point?
Yeah, I think that card is it's just fantastic. Good answer to
Yeah.
Chalice of the Void. All of the one drops, just whatever you want. I
Mhm.
think that card is you're going to be a fixture of legacy control decks for a long time. For one of those, 3 mana resilient haymakers,
Yeah.
does Call of Cunning work its way back in the mix, especially now that you
Thought
have?
about that.
Yeah,
I have the same issue with both Sulfuric Vortex and Court of Cunning, which is flash threats are very good versus both of those cards. And I was actually kind of afraid that if I played a Vortex and my opponent just responded with 3/4 flash, I'd be like, shit, I'm probably losing this race now. And Court of Cunning has the exact same problem, though.
yeah, it does. Is there any, I guess, other option that could work its way in if that doesn't have those issues?
I really thought about it. The best card I came up with, which is also not that good, is True Name Nemesis. But the problem is, I think that card
Hmm.
hasn't aged well. Like the problem with True Name is I mean, yeah, no one plays Council Judgment, but it gets cleaned up by Terminus. It's also weak to Power Blast, and I think they're just... Oh, also versus the black mid-range decks, where Kothis used to like clean them up solo, they usually have Plague Engineer, and they usually have a lot of them. So
Yeah. Is there any case for just like a fourth iteration or something? Is that absurd?
that's not absurd. In fact, I think you could justify playing the fourth iteration over Fawn in your main deck anyways, so it's kind of fine as it is. I don't know. If Bant Uro becomes a lot more popular, I think you have to really reassess what you're trying or how you try to win that matchup. Because I think there's not a lot of really great ways unless you completely restructure your game plan. Like you really do have to think about it. Like Tommy and I talked about it before the tournament, and Tommy said something like, "I'm like over 80% win rate, but almost all my losses are to Bant Uro." And he said he was starting to side in Submerge versus him, which is a really awkward sign because you don't really want Submerge versus a control deck.
No, sure don't. Yeah, so that definitely deserves some further thought, and I imagine people will pick up some, some variation on Anirag's deck if they're looking to beat this. So
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, maybe that's the next task, is finding that obscure sideboard card that actually can reflip that in your favor.
Yeah, and I don't know, like the actual answer may be, and this is going to sound really crazy, is just Painful Truths in a black Underground Sea somewhere because
I was gonna joke about that actually. Yeah,
I've played that version of the deck, and actually that version of Grixis, when you sideboarded like one Mystic Sanctuary, two Painful Truths, and you had that Underground Sea setup, was actually quite good versus like the Bant Miracle bullshit, as long as you kept Uro off the board, which you basically, all of these things only work if you're not getting Uro'd. I'm not gonna lie.
well, you know how you beat that, don't you, Jarvis? The Mind Harness.
That doesn't really work because you know what that gets killed by? Prismatic Ending for 1 mana.
Yeah, I can't do that.
It also
Okay,
just
back to
doesn't
the
work,
drawing board.
generally speaking, for a lot of reasons, because I don't want Mind Harness in my deck versus that matchup as well. So a few other questions I'll answer real quick. Any thoughts on a build with 4 Ragavan, 1 to 2 Prismari command as only green sources for Colossus? Sounds kind of heinous to me. I wouldn't do it, but you can try it, Eric. What about Mystic Sanctuary? I don't ever want to tap land this deck. I would rather just go out and like burn a piece of wood or something. Maybe even burn a Mystic Sanctuary.
Maybe as the sideboard plan, right? It's like when you have 4 iterations and then you board in a Sanctuary, some Pyroblast, and then any fetch land is one of those in the late game.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues because like sometimes you just draw the damn card and it's really horrible. Like I keep a lot of one-landers in this deck. Like for obvious reasons. Like an island cantrip hand is generally just a keep, No. Oh, and the sideboard for Bant?
Yeah, that's
oh, I see.
I was saying too.
Okay. That's more reasonable, but I don't... The problem is I think iteration is not nearly powerful enough versus Bant to make that a legitimate plan is what I would think. Because I think if you just cast 3 Night's Whispers versus Bant as blue-red, I don't even think you're ahead versus them necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has to be Painful Truths, I think. Like that.
I think the 4th Ragavan actually is big against Ban as well. That is one of your best cards, and especially against these decks that also have a bunch of the cheap blue spells and so on.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, let's say you attack, you connect with Ragavan, and you flip a Ponder, and you make a treasure, you use a treasure to cast a Ponder. It's basically like you've attacked with an Arcanist and just flash back a Ponder, right?
It is.
And then you can even like aim higher, where sometimes you just flip their Sylvan Library and the game is basically over if they can't kill it.
So that's nice.
So I think the 4th Ragavan is big there.
Sure. Let's say one thing. Do not cast Uro. Do not cast your opponent's Uro, basically at all costs. Just let it go to exile and be thankful that that's 1 Uro accounted for, that you basically don't have to worry about them ever drawing. I mean, obviously they might have another one, but just don't do it unless if you have a very good reason to need to do it.
Yes.
So I think that about covers the deck list. DT Lord says, I flipped a Narset with 3 treasure. Wow, that sounds filthy. All right. So I actually did something different. I ran the Arena. Okay, joking aside, Arena has no replays, so people used to just record their matches in OBS. But I actually decided it was just better to do it for even this event, because the MTGO replay thing is kind of buggy. So
As we saw on Monday, yeah.
yeah, it drives me nuts. But so I just recorded this with no sound, no overlay. Pretty easy to do through OBS if you want to set that up, and definitely helpful for arena matches because there's literally no replay feature. So even though I'm anti-arena. So round one, how do I pause it? Car works. A known GP top 8 competitor from Japan. They usually plays weird Bant decks, either Bant control or like Bant natural order. Either way, I'm not mowing this hand versus either of them. It's just too good, I think. Let me see.
Yep.
Can I make this bigger?
Hand's great, deck's great.
Well, deck is definitely great. As you'll see on this day, I did not play great, but my deck did feel busted. So honestly, like, oh, sort of. We'll just continue. And this is at normal play speed, so there should be enough time to catch things, and I can always pause. Yeah, I'm gonna post this on YouTube. So, they ponder. I'm clearly not forcing this. I just like immediately F6 through it because there's no reason to. And I'm just looking at this main deck Pyroblast. I'm like, this is obviously a good call for this matchup. But what we're going to see really quick. Can I speed this up? I usually thought there's a speed option in the Windows Media Player. So we might be playing it a little bit slower now, but Ragavan, you can't really ask for much more than that, and I don't think there's really any merit to playing anything else on turn one. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Especially as we might end up wanting to use the Delver as forcible bait potentially and keep the Brainstorm.
Yeah, so about that real quick. I chose not to force because versus a deck with plows, it's just so easy for them to have a bunch of removal. And yeah, you could argue that the Ragavan's going to get you a card back on average. The problem is versus their deck specifically, if you don't hit a cantrip or like something like Sylvan Library, there's actually a lot of dead hits right here. Like any removal spell is essentially dead. The force is dead. So I decided not to fight over it, but
yeah, I mean, I figure they're going to be better in long games for the most part anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, the Delver, if you could have one threat in play, I think you would rather it be Ragavan most of the time. And let's say we don't draw a superfluous blue card, we're going to play Delver, and then if we end up wanting to fight over that, we have to pitch a Brainstorm. Whereas, I think it might be better just to burn the Forcible there, get a hit with Ragavan, and have Brainstorm and Pyroblast access. And I think that's going to, more often lead to you just running away with the game than whatever situation we find ourselves in now.
Sure. Someone asks, is Ragavan better than Delver on turn one? Yeah, I think it is, because you're not even expected to flip blind more than like 45% of the time or whatever the number is. You can work out to the exact number it is, but it's not. You would have to be greater than 50% to make that, or you would have to be greater than or equal to 50% to make it good, I think. I assume you agree with that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a simple calculation you can do. Now here I think it's interesting which order you're supposed to play the spells in. So you can play Delver, then Fetch, then Ponder. I think I probably end up doing that. But you could also make a case for just Brainstorming first, then playing Delver. The extra land's not great. The basic mountain, rather.
Yeah, I guess what do we think we're looking for at this stage, right? We probably don't need that third land. So we have a card that we're happy to shuffle back to the Scalding Tarn. We would like to have a 1-mana threat here probably, so we could.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're pondering. So I guess we're pondering now in case we hit a 1-drop and also want to keep one of the other cards.
Yeah, and here was one of the downsides with regards to playing your land first. Because if you ponder into that wasteland and waste the savannah, that's a huge swing for you. But now you have to decide if you even want to keep this. Like, this Regent's really, the problem with Regent in this matchup is, for all of these things I said about it being unkillable a lot of the time, Swords of Plowshares doesn't really care how big a creature is. It literally just doesn't.
And also, we used up our one shuffle effects, and now we don't actually have one to pair with the Brainstorm, so...
But I decided to keep it because I think the Wasteland is just too valuable. Because notice, they didn't And now they're forcing the Delver. I'm like, oh my god, it must be in great shape if they're forcing it. Because now I don't even care about that Delver. I'd rather just cast a Regent.
But did we stack our deck so we could flip the Delver?
No, there were no spells. I
Oh well,
just kept
that's
that
the other thing.
Ponder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the other thing too. Is that if our plan is to run out Delver, then um, it's at least a turn away from actually doing anything.
But I was so happy that they actually forced it. I'm like, this has to be great for me. Now they're playing Predict. Now, Predict tells you a lot about their deck. If you've played any amount of Legacy versus decks like these, it tells you first off they probably have Terminus in their deck, and it also tells you that they probably have annoying cards that aren't very good, like Counterbalance.
That makes sense. I mean, counterbalance with Savannah is a little dicey, I suppose, but
Yeah.
you can, I suppose, you can afford some amount of that.
Oh man, I really wish I had the speed up feature. I forgot how slow this person played.
Can you just drag the bar
I can,
across?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't want to miss like my critical decisions is the problem. But I probably will like drag through some of the less interesting parts. But yeah, now I think you just auto Wasteland and you probably just auto play your Regent, even though it's only a 4/4. The thing is, like, I don't think the size matters in this matchup because I just expected if it lives, it's going to live for long enough that it'll kill them almost no matter what. And if it dies, it's because it's dying to Swords of Plowshares, like I said. Them brainstorming here in response is kind of weird. And I couldn't really figure it out at the time, but I think what this actually means is that they're going to play Counterbalance next turn. Or they're setting up a Terminus, actually, is the other thing that could make sense, right? I'm watching it in Windows Media Player. Can I set it? Can I set it there? If anyone knows this, all right. Actually, yeah, they could be looking for Terminus, but it actually turned out to be Counterbalance. It definitely could have been Terminus. Someone makes a great point. I could just install VLC Player real quick if you're familiar with that one, Dom.
I am, yeah.
I think I'm going to awkwardly try to install it. Wait. You all might see me clicking on something that looks like not this, but we can still continue to play the match while it downloads real quick. But yeah, this counterbalance is a pain in the ass. Like, I'm thinking to myself, like, when is the best time to try to crack it? And let me see if you find a convenient window to crack it.
I mean, I'm kind of thinking we might have to spend the force on it, honestly.
Yeah, but I didn't end up doing that. Maybe I should have actually.
The thing is, it's going to be hard to reliably blast it, and even if you think you find a window, their deck
Yeah.
is so dense with ones, so, there's not actually a great chance that's going to work.
Yeah, maybe
And
I
our
should
deck is so
have.
dense with ones that if they have a way to engineer that, then we're just in rough shape.
Shoot. Oh no. Stupid install. Okay. Maybe I can run the install on a different window. Sorry about that, chat. Trying to install this real quick so I can control the speed of this because this is like kind of painfully slow because this is like literally, live speed play, which is frankly is slow a lot of the time, right? So I think I should have actually blasted right here. And you know why? We know their top card's probably bad. I don't know. It's like really complicated versus like this shit, like to decide when to blast the counterbalance.
The other thing too is they are getting close to having Mystic Sanctuary online, which again, I don't know if they can play that in their Savannah Forest deck, but I assume you want it once you have Counterbalance and Terminus and so on.
So I basically get punished the max where they predict Jace away and reveal Terminus. I'm like, God, this is so awful. So do I blast it now with a fetch on the stack because it's blind?
Is it getting better for you?
Yeah, so I think now I'm priced into doing it. And and they flip a Force of Will, and I'm like, okay, well, at least they have to fetch in between. So I could hypothetically force the Terminus and probably be safe. And I'm probably priced into that by this point, right?
Yes, I'd agree. And pitching, I assume Delver?
I assume Delver as well,
Yeah.
because, like, I mean, there are two ways to play this. If you pitch the Brainstorm and play the Delver, then you're, like, saying, okay, now I have to wait for you to not have another Terminus, or even, like, a land plus Mystic Sanctuary is probably enough to reset up in a turn or two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let me switch to VLC, because this is I forgot how slow this player is. It's just ridiculous.
It's kind of heinous.
All right. I'll do that. Let me close this real quick. Wait. Why is it like stuck? What's going on with this program? Why does it appear to be frozen? Oh god. Maybe it's my computer.
I am honestly down to just look at the Moto replays at this point.
No, just give me. I think I can figure it out real quick.
Okay. In the meantime, I will go pet my cat. BRB.
Dom, come back. I figured it out. Well, to answer main deck Pyroblast is that I wanted a way to kill Regents in the mirrors and also deal with Uro. I figured it out. It was like stuck on some loading thing that didn't show up, but now we're on 1.5 speed, which is much
beautiful.
Better. All right. Let's go back. Really do not love the way I played this game. Basically, I think not forcing this counterbalance was heinous, I think, in retrospect. But see what happens. Right.
We have done a few of these reviews now with you playing Delver basically every time. Over the course of those, have you noticed, certain types of mistakes that you think you're more prone to making with these decks?
I play a lot more conservative versus like control decks than a lot of other people do. I think that is probably the biggest mistake I make on average, which, like, it sounds weird to say because I don't think it's necessarily a mistake sometimes, but there is some proportion of the time where it's definitely a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people play, like, Protect the Queen a lot more aggressively than I do, like, trying to, like, force a will, removal spells, and whatnot. And I've generally found most of the time that doesn't work out very well, especially in a deck that has so many, like, this version of the deck has 14 creatures. That's quite a lot. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm going to force a will or removal spell if it's, like, checkmate in 2, but here it's not checkmate in 2, like, so it's kind of hard to justify this a lot of the time, but, Oh, I increase the speed even more? No, I think so. I think the speed is maxed out. So I'll check quick speed. Oh no, we're up to 2x. Hooray, Dom. We figured it out. I think 2x is a reasonable speed. Because the 1.5 was still a little bit slow,
When you listen to podcasts, are you a 1.5x man, a 2x man?
Well,
you slow it down even? Where do you land in the end?
So I'm not going to lie. I have not sped you and Ari up, so I've spent the full amount of time. But I'm also not going to lie. I really, really, really loathe the ads that you're forced to do, which I don't blame you. It's a corporation sponsoring you, but I basically tune out. I'm just like, all right, hopefully this doesn't last more than 30 seconds. So when I'm driving, I leave it on 1x generally. If I'm at home, I'll probably bump it up to 1.2 or 1.75. There are certain people that if you do that, they become actually ununderstandable. So Max Mick is like limited YouTube videos. If you try to do that, You just couldn't understand what
Oh
you were
yeah,
saying. So that's how it is. Anyways, I brainstorm a response to Jace because I hope to hit something, and I don't. So now I'm kind of dead, you know, because 2 regents are not what you want versus Jace the Mind Sculptor. I mean, now I just play it out, and it's just like, well, this sort of sucks. I don't even bother to delve the extra thing, because it doesn't matter making it bigger on that turn cycle, because it's always going to be bounced or killed. You should just leave the spell in the graveyard, you know?
Silkies, you don't have to apologize to me. I don't have any personal, emotional investment in the ads being there either. I just, it's part of the job.
Yeah, anyways, now I'm, like, pretty close to dead. Obviously, I'm going to fire the bolt, but they have an Uro in the graveyard, so it's basically just, like... I'm basically, like, 0% to win by this point, I think. Nice thing about this is we get to see how I sideboard live and what was going through my head. Which is kind of underrated, you know? Because I don't know, if you watch the like arena ones or whatever, it's really hard to see how they sideboarded or what they're thinking at any point. Counterbalance is really, really, really awkward here again, and I'm just like, well, probably have to brainstorm a response because it's so likely to be prisoned out, but I'm also just like mostly dead. I tried dashing just for some hopes, and I believe my hopes are about to be dashed. And indeed, there's a portent on top of the deck. Get it? Dashed hopes.
Oh, yes. Haha.
Haha. You loved
Truly
it so much.
Hilarious. Very droll.
Droll? That's a nice British word if I've ever heard one. And
oh, it's a great word. Yeah.
As you confirmed, they do have Mystic Sanctuary in their deck. It just makes too much sense to not play the card, you know. So I think I can about call this game, and I think I do soon. Which is oh yeah, they just Uro me. I think I pack it in. So nice. I can save a few seconds of our life. And now you can see the spinning circle because it's me conceding. Alright. Generally, Gut Shot, not very good in this sort of matchup. So that can go. These blasts are good. Surgical is decent. Vortex is... Like I said, it's fine. But actually, I think Vortex is better versus this version that we saw. Less likely to have Endurance and less likely to have Ice Fangs. Because they did not play Snow basic lands.
Is the Minik Endurance stuff stock, or is that just an Anurag project?
But is it a Matt Dilk situation?
I think Anurag does decide what stock for the most part.
Okay, so then it'll probably be stock for anyone copying his deck list.
I mean, you said that this player tends to do their own thing, and then you have other miracles experts like Stephanox and others who, I imagine set the tone to some degree.
I mean, this person, all the cards they played, I know are cards Anurag no longer likes in the deck. Like, they don't like Counterbalance and stuff like that. And I think I'm debating on this, like, Borrower, and it's, like, kind of tough. It's, like, kind of exactly okay. And you can shave a Wasteland sometimes because, I don't know, like, once you see Mystic Sanctuary, Wasteland sometimes is not that good versus these Bant decks. Like, obviously it was great in Game 1, and in that Game 1, if I drew 2, I probably would be okay. Anyways,
the other thing too is that now the oil curve is even lower than before. You don't have stuff like Oko or Arcanist or whatever. Wasteland just doesn't cast any spells, so you'll have a one colored pip or two for the most part.
Anyways, I'm just planning to try to beat them down because like I don't have any cantrips. I can't really set anything up. I have exactly one counterspell, so like trying to sit back and play around, sweepers is not an option. You should just deploy all your stuff. Now, Ragavan here is actually kind of nice, because what you can do is play around a sweeper by dashing. So, really, really hoping that this connects. Obviously, like, reasonable chance it doesn't. And, if it hits, great. If it doesn't, not so good. So they do get to clear a card off from their Brainstorm, but they fetch in response, like, and then they flip over a plow, and I'm like, I'm like, all right, I guess at least they're not drawing a plow. All right, so the one neat thing Portent can do is it can Miracle Terminus during your opponent's turn. And here, what that means is I'll have to hardcast Fawn if that happens, you know?
Yeah, which is a little easier thanks to the treasure. You know, it means you don't have to burn your fetch land right away or anything like that.
But they don't Miracle Terminus. I see a Flooded Strand. I'm just like, well, how about these mountains? Or how about these lands?
Right. Try again. Channeler.
I do get to keep dashing the Ragavan to try to play around Terminus, which is kind of nice. But then there's another problem, like, I can't even fawn it because I didn't play my land first.
Yeah, I think you just have to let that one go anyway.
Yeah, I thought about it. And now the real question is, do I play another threat out?
I think I probably would at this stage, actually.
So if you do that, then you have to fawn pitching Regent if they Miracle Terminus because you no longer have enough mana to play around the thing, right?
You do. I figured that the channeler helps to set up the Delvers. It helps to, and I think it helps to put them in a situation where they need to have a sweeper to stay in the game. But could see the argument the other way too.
And this Quick is like, wow, they're playing a boomer list of this deck because I have not seen a Vendilion Quick in this type of deck in probably like 1.5 years. Brainstorm is actually an excellent draw here, though. And now that they're doing this, I think I actually am more inclined to deploy a bunch of threats. Because, like, the read is, okay, they're very unlikely to have a sweeper if they're using Vendilion Quick to trade with a 1/1 Delver. And now I use this to, like, to get things going. And I'm like, well, this borrower is actually, I think, good enough on average that I don't want to mill it.
Yeah, 3/1 flash is just kind of nice here.
Yeah. And now the question is, how do you play this game out? And now I think you do have some leeway to actually play around a sweeper. Yeah, Boomer Miracles. Our opponent's definitely playing Boomer Miracles, but, you know, that's how it is. So for as long as this match is, the next match is much shorter. So,
good.
And I'm like, oh my god, this is kind of a disaster. But
yeah, another card that I think whose stock goes up massively.
Agreed.
With how Delver is configured these days, and even against like the new Urza Saga decks and so on, good against elves. That is a card you definitely want in your 75 if you can afford it.
Remember when I blind fetched Mountain and Island because I thought there was a chance my opponent would back to basics me? I didn't even say it at the time, but I'm actually sure that's what my thought process is because normally it's pretty free to, not do that stuff.
Wait, hold on. Do we want this Delver?
Yeah, I think I should have milled it in retrospect. I don't remember what I was thinking right there. I think that was actually really bad.
This Forcible is nice, though. We'd love to see that.
So I think what you're supposed to do here, or what I should have done, was mill the Delver and then resolve the Ponder, probably put the Force in my hand, and just play a big Regent.
I agree.
And obviously you just attack and force the Engineered Explosion. And I sort of do the same thing, except now I have to draw this Delver, right?
Is there any case for drawing the Surgical, casting Surgical on Source of Plowshares, and then going for the Regent?
Well, maybe there's already another Plow exiled from Ragavan, so they only have 2 left in their deck. So I kind of feel like not really.
Yeah. And you really want to tag this if you can.
Now, the problem is my top card is actually Delver of Secrets.
It's interesting that they tap the planes there and kind of close off the possibility of drawing a fetch and then just casting Uro immediately.
So I daze this, I get max punished. But their top card is blind, so I think it's just correct to do that every time. And now I'm kind of sunk, because the issue is they can just keep casting. They can cast Uro, and if they ever have a 1 on top for the Surgical, I'm basically dead in the water.
Oh, and we drew the Delver too. Yeah, this is just so...
I mean, I got max punished for not milling that Delver, I think, essentially. But now the issue is they have Brainstorm on top of their deck, so if you wait until draw step to do it, they can just respond with Brainstorm, right? and probably put a 1 on top to counteract thing.
Oh, that's disgusting.
And also,
yeah.
like, I basically, I should have actually draw stepped Surgical to Uro and just hope that it didn't have a 1. I think that was actually correct. So I think I threw this game so hard.
Yeah, I think you were still in very dire straits here, but
Yeah, that was not well played on my. I think that was just awful. Yep. All right. So that was round 1. Obviously, kind of a grind fest, but I didn't play perfectly, and honestly, it counterbalance makes the game a lot harder to play. So I think their version's a little bit better versus me than normal. But is what it is. All right, Doomwake. I had heard rumors he was playing Affinity, so like, I'm just gonna keep a hand that looks like this 100% of the time because Gutshot is extremely good, and Delver Secrets I think is a really important card in the matchup.
yeah, and Wasteland often is going to be good as well, especially against Urza Saga.
Yep. I think. Oh, I can just speed this up again.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it doesn't like save something as a default setting, but
yeah, it's okay. 6. All right, so Doomwake going to 6. This is just so obvious. And this Gutshot looks so juicy. And the thing is, you actually have to main phase the Gutshot because what if they just play an artifact land? So I basically get to use all my mana and get a... Like I said, it's either tempo or an extra damage, but I think the tempo is just way more important. And I reveal Brainstorm, and now I debate whether or not to waste them, but I'm like, if they went Tomb into Seat, have no play, they probably have no more lands. And
right, and also with the way the Affinity deck is set up, it's all of its cards kind of feed off each other. So, Seat being an artifact makes the Affinity cards cost 1 less and so on. So just taking them off any piece of material, I think, has a lot of value here. And yeah, you see you reaching for those Pyroblasts, and normally that's not something you would think to do against like the artifact aggro deck, but this version has a bunch of Thought Monitors and usually Psy, Emery, Master of Ethereum, maybe stuff like that.
I actually dial it back again because I look at how my setup is. I think my setup is actually so good that I don't need all of the Pyroblasts, but I'm going to keep one.
Yeah, I think some is good.
Meltdown seems a little bit overkill. Well, the actual issue is you can't beat a pair of constructs without something like Meltdown. Like, it actually is just too much most of the time. Like, I would not play Meltdown normally, except the Urza Saga deck is actually that good, I think. It's only overkill if you don't actually need the nuclear option,
Yeah, and even if the matchup is already good, we've been over the mathematics of this before, but like if that one slot makes those matchups even better, then that's still a good use of the slot. In addition, I think if there was a way to really take people off guard for this tournament, now that the Affinity deck is out there, it was likely to be some kind of a Urza Saga LED deck. If someone told you have like 1 day to break this format, that's I think the first place you would look. So I think it's a nice hedge against the unknown in that sense as well.
So I kept a kind of a reactive hand, but I think any hand with removal spell, Wasteland, Ponder, Regent, you basically just cannot mulligan. And they kill my Chandler, that's fine.
It's kind of a tilt that Ancient Den is the only one available in the old frame.
Oh, right. Oh, man, someone's looking up what Meltdown does. It's a they don't really print them like that anymore, is what I'll say about that card.
Back in the day, against the really old school Affinity decks, this was, red mana for one-sided Armageddon. You just blow up all their lands, and then if you had more mana to spare, you could get some other stuff as well.
So I'm obviously using my Forked Bolt because I just want to get a huge Regent anyways. I don't think their deck can really beat a huge Regent if you just counter Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, one thing that a lot of the decks have picked up is an Ether Spellbomb in the main deck for your Saga, and the main function of that is literally just to bounce a big Regent.
This is a really good Ponder. It's just like, I actually need more threats, and I also need, say, Disruption. Borrower is like kind of both. In one. So they float one. What can they even get? Like, Mox Opal, I guess, makes sense. So I was like thinking about forcing this. I'm like, I don't think that matters. I think I would rather just force any plow on my thing. And here, in fact, is a source of plowshares. And now I can play this 1-mana 1/1 and just attack 3 times. Oh, did I lose you? Are you back? Is chat still here? All right, are you back?
Yes, I believe so.
That one wasn't that interesting. You know, basically, the Affinity deck just folded to mulligan a bunch of me killing their stuff, which you could have expected on average, I think.
Yeah.
I do think that deck does mulligan a bunch. Not that that's necessarily a fault of the deck. I just think it's really hard to keep a hand without Ancient Tomb or Mox Opal in that deck because of how Urza Saga operates.
Right.
Right. Move you over there, and let's get to round 3. I don't remember what this matchup is, but I think it's fairly quick as well. Maybe not, but we can also speed it up again. So Moon Madness. Oh, I remember this. This person generally plays like Dark Depths, but kind of hard to like know exactly what they're doing. This hand's like not even good versus Dark Depths is the issue if you think they are actually Dark Depths, you know?
Right. And this is one area where not having the fourth wasteland certainly costs you.
Yeah, but that's just their previous results. I'm not actually sure that they're Dark Depths by this point as well, is the other issue. But I think that hand's just not good on the draw as well. Like, this hand's so much better than the first hand, which is kind of crazy. 6-card hand couldn't actually cast anything. It was just like Wasteland and 5 spells, which is not real where you want to be either.
Yeah, and Ragavan is the kind of card that can let you still run away with the game, even just on 5 cards. But basic Snow Island suggests, depth's probably not in the cards there.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I'm like, this Ragavan is probably good versus basic Island, and probably not that good versus Dark Depths, actually, on average, to be quite fair. But the second Ragavan's not great unless the first one gets killed, but there's a chance that Ragavan digs me out of this hole, you know? By the way, one thing I realized later into the tournament, and you're going to hate this, my basic should have been Snow.
Oh, so that if you flip a Ice Fang, you can upgrade it?
It frustrates me so much that that's correct, but I think it actually is.
I respect Patrick Sullivan was telling this anecdote where he lost a game as Reanimator because he had to reanimate an Ice Fang, but his basics were they were normal swamps, and so he lost a Death Up, and it's like, yeah, and if I had to do it over again, I would. I'm not gonna give in. I'm not gonna bow to this pressure.
By the way, this is the best gut shot versus this type of deck that you could possibly get.
Yeah, versus Ice Fang, gut shot so much better than Forkball for the most part.
Now I'm just looking for threats. I actually think they're blue-green Omni by this point, based on how the game played out.
Oh, I would agree, actually. That makes sense.
Yeah. I also just think this specific person is more likely to play combo than other people. Now the question is, how do you want to play this versus blue-green Omni? This is like kind of a good setup, because you can play it like this and not have to fetch. Treasures are broken. You heard it here, chat. And the Vista really, really makes me think. It feels so much like Omnito. I can't really explain why. Regent, I think, is just mostly better by this point, especially if there's a lot of mirrors, is the issue. Because you don't want to be the Forager person in a mirror when your opponent just has a bunch of Regents, because it'll just get outclassed.
Yeah, and Undying Bolt is a kind of big sticking point as well, I think.
Well, that was my argument before, then it turned out I was wrong about that. It's kind of I think that doesn't matter as much because it's so good versus tribal decks. Like the Fortress is unstoppable versus tribal decks if you get to attack with it.
Yeah, it is. It just feels like Regent largely is as well for the most part, and so having that comparative advantage in the mirror maybe is the tiebreaker.
I think I have to daze this, even though it's like kind of awkward.
So when you see this Sylvan, does that move the needle in terms of this being Omni versus some kind of control deck?
I think it's
For
still
you?
Omni because they played a second island as well.
Is that not a thing you think
It's
they
hard to
could do
explain
otherwise?
why I think it, I guess, but and also I don't crack the vetch because I know there's another blue card,
It's
so
just
this is so
kind of
safe.
broken. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't know. Well, the second forest definitely means it's blue green Omni by this point.
Yes.
I mean, it's not 100%. Now you're up to like 99.99% it being Omni.
Second Forest makes me think either
Eureka.
Eureka,
Yep.
which shows up sometimes, or the sideboard Uro plan.
So can you identify why I did this? Well, now I guess now the
You want Delirium for your yeah.
yeah. Red, discard a card from my hand, please and thank you. Would you say you love to see it?
Oh, I absolutely would.
I don't even want to cast this Sylvan. It like doesn't actually accomplish anything because they're dead next turn if I get another turn essentially.
Right.
So the busted one drops might be pulling me out of the. Remember, this was my 5 card hand, and it doesn't really look like it, right? Kind of just looks like I had a functional draw, right?
This game is a great advertisement for for this build of the deck, definitely.
And I think you just been that because like if for some reason that I get another turn, I'm not actually dead. Which spoiler, I don't think I'm getting another turn anymore.
No, they have it all.
So I think there was actually a chance that they didn't have the last
Okay.
payoff card because they had to pitch Cunning Wish. But then they didn't. They chose to shuffle
Yeah,
off Ponder. Then they have another Ponder. I'm like, come on, brick, brick, brick,
yeah,
brick, 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 brick.
yeah. Pitching the Cunning Wish is very strange, though, right?
They didn't have another blue card. I think is the actual answer. But
Oh, so they had Veil and they had to draw it off the Veil. That makes
yeah,
sense.
exactly. And then well, Emrakul does Emrakul things, which
Yeah.
kill me and all my permanents. I don't know why they. I think they accidentally revealed that Mystic Sanctuary because I think it's like in an inconvenient spot.
Yeah, it's awkward where if you try clicking the draw a card thing, sometimes it just shows them your hand instead.
Right.
It like the interface moves, and so you end up like accidentally, I guess, BMing them if you see it that way. So that's unfortunate. But yeah, the sideboarding makes a lot of sense.
This is not a matchup where I think you need that many threats. And depending on whether or not you think they have Boseiju, uh, Wasteland can be like good slash not good. I think it's generally not that good for some, but you could shave like one Wasteland here. I wonder if I shave another Wasteland for something else. Say like I don't know. The other options don't seem that appealing. I don't know why I'm looking at this vortex. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. Yeah, I'm just putting my ducks in a row and checking to make sure.
Yeah, always worth that. And you do have a card like Lightning Bolt, whose only utility is as Lava Spike, basically. I guess it can, get a collateral out of the way. But when you have marginal cards like that,
Mhm.
it is worth thinking, something else might be better instead. But
I think my other cards are just not that good. Is the actual issue with this setup of the deck.
yeah,
So I have a lot of Power Blasts in my deck, which is really the primary reason to keep this hand. Is Power Blast is so good in the matchup. Daze is a nice one. Now the question is, do you brainstorm or not? And I'm just like, I kind of feel like just playing the threat is better because in all of the times where I miss on that brainstorm, it's actually horrible, right?
hmm
I think it's next turn where my brainstorm, where I think I don't draw a land, so it's I have to cast brainstorm, and I think there's actually a really interesting decision, but we'll see what happens. But so far, this is going according to plan, which is like play some 1-drops versus the combo deck, and have just enough counters to kill them with the 1-drops. Iteration's not the best in the matchup because I don't think you want a pile of Night's Whispers, because I think a lot of the time you don't have enough time to deploy all of your Night's Whispers. But I guess it's good if they just like kind of sit around and try to develop past you, right? Because sometimes what can happen is they just sit there trying to develop Carpet of Flowers and trying to get past your mana disruption. And then I guess in those games, expressive iteration becomes a lot more powerful, right? Force of Will is a really good draw, actually. I guess, obviously.
Yeah, not even actually. Actually has nothing to do with it here. It just, straight up is your best draw.
Another Brainstorm, you definitely have to just surveil it by this point.
Agreed.
Oh, wait, this Brainstorm's not interesting. This is just very clear what I'm supposed to do with it, I think. I actually think, yeah, I should just put 2 lands back. And if I need a land, I can just draw another. And if I don't need another land, I can just fetch away. So now I think I'm basically going to crush them this game now. Which might be unfound confidence, What do you think of the unfound confidence that I'm going to crush my opponent for no particular reason?
I think you're in good shape. I mean, you still just could get hosed by Beseju or something, as you highlighted, but yeah, certainly like our spot this game for sure. And you decide you do want to draw the 3rd land here?
Yeah, I think because my plan is to cast Iteration this turn, and if I somehow brick on a land, it's just so much better to have the land in hand, right?
Yeah, it does get more dangerous then, so I like that. And you kind of you have as much interaction as you need, and you have the threats that you need, so you kind of just don't want to, drawing a land that could end up being dead is not the worst thing in the world.
Right. So this was the one downside to not playing the land first.
Yeah.
But I think it's okay. And I'm like, they're forcing this? I'm like, I don't even care, really. Yeah. Like, note, I think I should Pyroblast this because it presents a 2-turn clock. Because if you don't Pyroblast it, they can just block and trade.
I agree. So are we gonna have Delirium? So yeah, we're good.
Well, fortunately, it just always tells you if you have Delirium or not because there's blue text. Do you see the blue text?
Yeah.
Yeah. And keep in mind, this person also force of willed my iteration. To me, that feels like that they're weak,
It suggests certainly a second force, probably, and maybe a very reactive hand. Yep. Where you would think if they had most of the combo rolled up, they would hope to just find the final piece and then go off from there. And iteration, like by itself, is not that scary of a card here.
No, because you have to imagine how many pieces of disruption do you expect iteration to draw on average? There's not that many. And right. I decided not to fight over the force because I'm like, well, this feels weird. But I think now that they're at 9 or whatever, this is you go from a 2-turn clock to a 3-turn clock, but you have a bunch of interaction. I know the top card is Force of Will, so I just feel like forcing that is asking for trouble, And now they play Endurance. I'm like, well, this is kind of irritating. So I think I actually do have to force this because you know what happens to my creature otherwise. It has to attack every combat if able, Dom. And it does mean every combat if able.
Which does mean you have to run it into a giant region sometimes.
Yeah, there are downsides to that card, but I think generally the upsides are so high that it doesn't. Like, okay, Daze. Or, actually, better than Dazing is Forcing because we literally saw them use a Simian Spirit Guide this game. So you actually should just Forcible there every time instead. Yeah, I know. 2021 cards have downsides. That's weird. All right. So now I have to decide if I want to change anything on the draw, and I eventually do decide that I want the borrower. I think I probably end up killing a wasteland if I have to guess on the draw. Thanks, Sam Black. And I'm considering exactly one regent. It's like not the best card, but if I know my opponent's like doing shit like endurancing me, it like becomes a little bit more defensible, you know? What do you think of them having endurance in their deck versus Blue Delver? Do you think it's kind of weird? Oh no, Skype. Why is Skype not cooperating today? One sec, y'all. On Skype. Yo,
Yo.
what's going on?
I don't know. It might be. I mean, I guess we've used the same method of Skype plus screen share before, so I don't think it's that. I don't know.
It might just be like random internet fluctuations. The tubes are not cooperating.
Could be.
So my question, I asked you before or before the thing cut off, is what do you think of them having endurance in their deck, like post board versus Blue or Delver?
As the Omni deck,
Yeah.
I think I don't really like it. If you have the ability to hardcast it in a control deck, then I can kind of see it being good.
Mhm.
But in their deck, sometimes it's going to make you fetch the second green source, which is kind of awkward, and you can't really fight over it that easily. So often it's just going to get dazed, and they'll carry on with their life. And then, you don't have that many green cards, and the ones that you do have also tend to be good in the matchup anyway, right? Like they're Ice Fangs and Uro. So even in a spot where you would want to pitch it, there's a decently high cost associated with that. So I think I actually don't like endurance from their side.
For game 3 on the draw, I decided to cut one Wasteland and one Bolt inside in the Regent and a Borrower because they did show me
Sure.
endurance. So what that means is you might need to be slightly bulkier sometimes, and just having access to either like a bounce spell or like a dragon might be useful. Right. I think I end up. Sorry.
Dragon what, Jarvis?
I'm not going to dignify that with a response except this. So I actually keep this hand, and a lot of people would just like mulligan looking for a force. I think you actually have enough time versus Omnitel, generally speaking, that you should not mulligan these hands. Endurance can just not touch yards. I don't know what you mean by that, but whatevs. Anyway, the Surgical is actually a decent draw because sometimes what I do versus Omni deck, I don't know if we've discussed this before, I just use it as peak to determine what I'm supposed to do with my spells.
Yeah, I think this came up in the last showcase recap that we went through.
Oh yeah, I know it doesn't have to target. Actually, funny you bring that up. That's going to come up later, where someone's supposed to just cast and not target anyone. I will point it out when it happens.
Interesting. Are you scared at all of just not really having any interaction at this point?
Not really, because the version of this deck generally does not play many City of Traders or Ancient Tombs, because they usually go to things like Uro.
Yeah, you're gonna have time to find it probably.
So let's pause here. I think here is where I actually fucked up quite a bit. And tell me what you would do with this Ponder.
So this is kind of a tricky one where we could draw the island, put one of the two cards on top. I actually would kind of think Pyroblast actually, and then next turn we could ponder for a red source and we would know one of the cards on top, so we'd have 2 looks there, and then we get a 3rd look when we shuffle, but the odds there aren't that good, and if we miss, it's kind of bad. We don't even have a follow-up play in that situation either. And so, given that the Pyroblast right now is not actually reliable, and there's no guarantee, like if we keep this Daze, we're not applying that much pressure yet, and also they're on the play, they can build towards more mana, so no guarantee this Daze is going to be good. So I think I would actually ship this back.
Interesting. I actually think what I'm supposed to do is keep, but play it completely differently than how I played it, which is to put the Daze on top, draw it, put Pyroblast in between, and just attack and say go. What I think I end up doing is put the island into my hand and not have the Daze, then basically be forced to ponder into the Daze, and it's like not a very good ponder. So I think this was kind of a bad thing.
Yeah, I think if you're drawing the island, you're not casting Ponder. Because if you plan to draw the island and cast Ponder, then I think drawing Daze is just better there.
Yeah, so I think I just messed this up, and we'll see what happens. I'm pretty sure I do the... This is like such a... I don't know how to put it. I think this is an obvious play, and I think it's... If you rethink about it, it's just like clearly not very good.
Yeah, the problem here is we kind of wasted a Ponder in a way. We're not getting maximum efficiency out of it, and now we have to spend it to find the Daze that we could have drawn instead. So...
Well, the other issue is what is going to happen next turn. I can't both draw with the Pyroblast and the Red Source, right?
Right. Yeah, so this is almost the best case scenario where the 3rd card down is the Red Source, and now if we want the Daze, we can't actually get access to both. Yeah, even with iteration. So yeah, it just kind of is messy all around.
Yeah, so I think doing the thing I described by putting the Daze in hand and using Pyroblast to flip it actually makes a lot more sense. And just skip a land drop for 1 turn, but I think that's actually fine. Yeah, we know that the Channeler only has to attack when it's Delirium. It's just our contention that 1 green 3/4 Flash Fire is not a good card for Omnitel to have in versus this type of deck. Or that's my contention anyways.
Right. It's like, yeah, we know what the card does, but does it do anything? Right, is the question here.
So I do this, which means I have shields down from 1 turn, which is kind of terrifying. Maybe this is a mistake too. But they respected Daze on all of the other games, so I kind of feel like I can just like get away with it.
Yeah, it's a little tough for them to jam if they don't have any backup. But then again, is that situation getting better for them? Right? Like if you find right now you don't have a Red Source. If you untap and draw a Red Source or play a Red Source, now Pyroblast is the threat that has to be respected. So maybe that actually is the best time for them to just go for it and hope, right?
I do this because I want to see if it's safe to play my channel or not. Spoiler, it's very much not safe.
Ooh, endurance.
Yeah, I mean, but like, again, remember when we talked about Forest? It's going to take some time for them to do it. Now, I actually ended up screening... One thing also to notice is they cited out Gristlebrand.
Huh.
And they cited in like just a bunch of creatures. So they're just basically a blue-green mid-range deck. I don't think that's very scary for my deck as I'm set up currently, you know?
Yeah, one reason why I've never liked those builds of Omni is that they turn themselves into a 3-card combo most of the time, where you need Show and Omni and then a payoff card instead of, often if you have one of the creatures, then Show into Grizzlebrand or Show into Emrakul is still very good in a lot of games of Legacy. And now they're kind of leaning into that even further, where they're just kind of this crummy mid-range deck that is going to draw like a dead Omniscience or whatever a lot of the time.
So I actually realized that I was like, okay, they only have... My actual thought process at the time was, okay, they only have 4 Show and Tell, so I can spend this turn taking it off to tap out, and then every other turn I'm just never going to tap out. What do you think of that?
I agree with that, yeah.
Because the other thing is, if you just pass with only Delver in play, then Endurance shuts you down next turn, so it's not even good to just like not take a risk on that turn.
Yeah, whereas now this is a serious clock that has to be respected.
Remember the one region I decided to side back in? Rewarded! And they just main phase it because they're like, yeah, this is good. And I'm just like, this doesn't even do anything. I mean, I guess it technically does, but it doesn't really. So I'm looking just for another red source. Because I still think it's relatively safe, and I'm pretty likely to hit a red source. Because even if I miss there, I can preordain for a red source as well. And just having a second red source is so much better, I think. I mean, obviously it looks risky, but I don't actually think it was that risky because you have 5 looks or 6 looks at a red source, you know? I ended up shuffling, just looking for, like, I don't think another Brainstorm is exactly what I want, but I think a second Power Blast is exactly what I want, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually think, impressively enough, I think I actually end up making one more mistake this game, which kind of looks crazy, but you're like, how on earth can you make another mistake this game? Because it seems so straightforward, but you'll see in a second. Because it seems like almost impossible to make another mistake, right? I assure you, it's not anything like attacking a 3-2 and a 3-4 because that would just like be weird. So here, I guess they just blocked playing around Lightning Bolt, but I'm like, if I have Lightning Bolt, don't I just attack with both and just bolt the Endurance? Or I just attack with both and then you block the 3-2, then I bolt you? So I kind of wonder about this block, right? But whatever, that's less of an issue. So now the question is, does another red source do anything? I don't think it does. Now the surgical actually does do something. It just gives me information on their next turn. Alright. Do you blast this?
So what could they conceivably get? I imagine they have all their veils in the main deck. There wouldn't be another one there. They could grab Flusterstorm, but then that chokes them on mana a little bit more anyway, and you have 2 copies of Power Blast there. Like maybe run afoul or something if they need to just survive a turn, but you're okay at that point because you have the Delver you can sacrifice. It means it wouldn't be lethal right away, but I think you can handle that. I think... I think you're probably okay with this. I don't know.
I think so too. I actually thought the most likely card that they were going to get is Intuition, and I get to obliterate them if they have Intuition. Well, no, so here's the thing. The Veil doesn't actually do that much. If suppose they have Show and Tell in hand, and I think they're going to go for Omniscience, what I can do is just surgical them in response to Show and see if the coast is clear. If they're just going to put an Omni, I can just blast the Omni with any other spell in the stack. So I think I'm supposed to just let this resolve. Remember, I love using surgical as peak because it just makes the game so much easier to play, you know? Dom, I don't have X-ray vision like Tom Ross. Do you?
I do not, sadly.
They got another Veil, and I'm like, I don't think that actually accomplishes anything because of the play I described, you know? I'm like, does this even matter? So if I blast it, they can Veil, but is that even good? I don't know, like, so I could guarantee lethal, but no, this was like weird. So them initiating the Veil in response, I think, is really bizarre. Like, why would you Veil there? What does that accomplish?
All of this is just kind of an odd turn sequence on the whole. It's
I don't remember why I surgicaled. Oh, I think I surgicaled to see, okay, what happens if am I safe to blast this arrow for a lethal? That's why I think I surgicaled them. Oh, wait, maybe I didn't make a mistake. I couldn't spot a mistake there. Alright, whatever. I guess no mistake was made. I'm just perfect, Dom. Got a round 4. Get it up. HJ Kaiser. This person is well known for playing either Delver or Hard Control. There's no in between.
So just blue deck of some kind, fairly
Yep.
mainstream.
Yep. What if they jam Omni but Emrakul? How do I put it? I don't know. Like, well, this hand sucks. So since I think they're another fair blue deck, I decided to bottom the second force because I don't think it's that necessary. I'm trying to unpack that statement. Did they even have an Emrakul in their deck? I guess they had the one. I guess you have to leave in one. Do they waste me here? Oh, you know what I was thinking at the time? Maybe I should have fetched Mountain, but the problem with fetching Mountain is that you don't get to daze, right?
Yeah, and if they are on, control of some kind, then Volk is going to be strictly better for the most part.
Yep. Now it just looks like a mirror of some sorts, and obviously it's like kind of annoying that I got wasted for basically like it was that's basically an avoidable wasteland, but it does cost you a reasonable amount, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here it looks like they're just fawning my thing, and I'm like,
that's wild. I mean,
I'm
I
like,
guess that makes sense if they have nothing else going on, but
I'm like, guess I just
snap
daze
off that
this.
daze.
The other reason to not do that is what if you just untap and cast Iteration, and then you just daze their daze there. So that's I think what I'm thinking about. And I guess that's the conclusion I come to. That it's just better to protect my Iteration than Brainstorm.
Sure.
Annoyingly, it gave them priority back because like I like clicked on the daze and unclicked it and clicked it. It might have been an untap tap situation, I guess. It's kind of weird that it does that. So, and this is just perfect. They didn't daze me. I can take a Regent, which is probably safe in game 1, and I can get my third land, which is it's beautiful, right, Dom? You bolt end step? Well, now you don't bolt end step.
And do we Fault Bolt or Lightning Bolt? I guess.
So the other thing you can do in game 1 is that generally just playing Regent here is safe.
Does seeing Tropical Island tell you anything about the construction of their deck other than that they have Tarmogoyf? Do you think?
Nothing. It just tells you that they're a boomer deck. But actually, I analyzed that they cannot have daze because they would have just dazed my Iteration, right?
Yeah, you'd assume so.
So I know they don't have daze, and now I get to just win the counter war, basically, and everything's looking pretty. Like, I have this 6/6 that no one can remove. Except with that, okay.
But we are putting cards in our graveyard so quickly here that we're just going to be able to cast that thing again before too long.
But they have an excellent top deck. Ragavan, which hits Ragavan. They're Ragavan flooded. Now, the problem is if you actually cast the other Ragavan, the original Ragavan dies. So I don't even know if you really want to do that. I don't know,
well, I guess you would lose the Ragavan anyway, right? If you get through the turn. The real question is, do you want to be casting the 3/1 borrow instead with that mana?
I think you do. Because the other thing is, now if I have a Forked Bolt, you've just played this thing out and I can Forked Bolt it, right?
Yeah, you've used one Forked Bolt, so having a second, I don't know how likely that would be exactly. But
well, most people where I play Gutshot play a second Forked Bolt.
And did you think there was a case for just a 5/5 region here.
No, not really, because I know I can take it slow. Because if you get it to 6/6, and they've already used 2 lightning bolts, it actually makes it so much harder. Why did I? Oh, I knew my top card was bad, so I didn't even really care that they did that.
Yeah.
Like, what does the treasure matter? What does the damage matter? No, neither of those things actually matter.
I think I would rather just have a 5/5 at this point. Like, it would have to be the
So,
difference is exactly. I guess they could have a bigger region of their own, but otherwise it's exactly they have the third lightning bolt and they have a forked bolt versus the fourth lightning bolt.
I think the reason I didn't do it was I knew the cards from Brainstorm, and I didn't want to crack my fetch.
Fair enough.
That I think I'm trying to. All the things you're saying are eminently reasonable, and I think that's the actual reason. And I mill the gut shot because A, it's not that good, and B, it's an extra counter on my regent. And now I just think I'm so far ahead. Like, this is a 7/7. What are they gonna do? Cast Brainstorm, which is like kind of terrifying. But you know what? 7/7 regents don't take very long to end the game with. They waste me, and I'm like, that doesn't even really matter. See, Boomer Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, just almost embarrassing in this situation, right?
This ponder's good enough, or this board is good enough to keep, I think.
Oh, this is instant delirium and kill their blocker. Yeah.
And I think you definitely don't want to shuffle this. The question is, what order do you want to draw in? I think the Delver has outlived its usefulness, especially if they just randomly top deck like a Regent or something.
Right. And the Pyroblast actually locks us up, I think.
Yep. Wait, did I put the Delver on top? I should have put the Delver on top so I could
sure hope
surveil
so.
wit.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think I didn't, and I realized it at this point. Yeah, I'm loose. I'm playing so bad on this day. But, at least I'm not playing Boomer Rug,
You made the correct choice in deck construction at least.
I did. And that's a huge leg up in this tournament, I think. So I think versus Rug, the Submerges are obviously a lock.
Definitely.
I think Gutshot is actually worse versus Rug.
Yes, because there were fewer likely just random X1s lying around.
But I think I end up keeping it because I saw Ragavan.
Do you think Borrower is a little worse against Rug too because they're less likely to have as many Delve creatures?
I think I probably end up cutting it for the Hydroblast.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And Gutshot is better versus Ragavan than Forked Bolt is, so I think I should leave it in for that reason.
Do you think Rug is less likely to have Channeler?
No, it's actually a little bit more likely because it works well with Tarmogoyf, right?
Yeah, they do kind of kill off the same cards, but at the same time, if usually they're going to have 4 Tarmogoyfs, right, versus 2 to 3 regents, and then if they have Brazen Borrower on top of that, they have Delver and Ragavan. That doesn't leave that many more slots that you can fit channelers in, unless you're like shaving iterations or something.
Yeah, Rug tends to play less iterations because they tend to be bulkier as well. But I don't know, like it's kind of weird all around. Like iteration correlates to having cheap cards in your deck. Like this deck is basically the most cheap version of Delver I've seen in a long time, right? Land count's really low. All of your spells basically cost 1. Every deck, blue-red is becoming the best. Every format. Except standard, I guess. I don't know. So, yeah, I think you just bolt. If they daze, you just daze back, and then that also insulates you from Wasteland for 1 turn, which is super nice. And yeah, I think you just have to make sure you don't get run out of the game by Wasteland right there. Because your hand's like really good, and they mulligan, so I'm just trying to reduce variance in this game, They think a long time right here. I don't really know why. Like, do you think they're just thinking about EOT Brainstorm?
I
It's
guess so.
It's also just equally likely that they are just like, yeah, I need to go to the bathroom, right?
Right. It is. I don't think you can read too much into those timing tells. And if you are really trying to optimize your, win rate or whatever, you should be merging in some of those fake timing tells. But
Well, I don't
you
do
ain't
it
got
on
time for that.
purpose. Sometimes I just have to go to the bathroom during a match. And then it introduces the fake timing tell that you mentioned.
Yeah, you balance your range by drinking like enough water 25 minutes in advance that you have to pee at exactly the right time.
And then they just don't know what you were thinking about. Anyways, really good cards because all I care about are just, trading for their cards. The only card that I'm scared of by this point, I don't really have a Queen answer to Tarmogoyf. But fortunately, it doesn't look like they have any green mana anytime soon. And I'm like, alright, this Blazing Volley is absolutely fine. So I think this is a Delirious Channeler whenever I crack my fetch, right?
Yeah.
Gut shot. Look at this gut shot! It's taking prisoners, Dom!
So good. Like free spells are absolutely broken, and when you have so many 1-mana spells, the value of a free spell gets even higher. So yeah. Gotcha massively overperforming here.
It's kind of funny. I don't even really want to surveil any of these cards away. Just hashtag first world problems, right?
Yeah, I mean you don't have to, I suppose.
But it feels like I'm wasting the surveil. I'm not actually. If you just draw all these cards and the game progresses normally, I don't think your opponent can really win,
Yeah. I mean there is a case for just like gut shotting and not doing anything else on this turn to avoid days.
I think that's what I'm thinking about. Yeah, I think it just makes too much sense because like if I just remove all their stuff and they missed a land drop and like I just know I have so much gas lined up, how do you lose, right? Someone says surveil to the top is a good use of surveil. I guess that's technically true, right? Just means you're dominating the game, so everything's great. By the way, this person actually has won an Eternal Weekend on 2 different continents in Legacy.
Oh wow. I mean that is impressive.
Can you guess which 2 continents?
Does Modo count as a continent?
No.
I'm gonna say Japan and Europe.
It's U.S. and Europe, or yeah, U.S. and Europe. He came to Pittsburgh once and just won with like some boomer Delver deck.
What's their name?
Hans Gothic Kaiser.
Oh right.
Well, H.J. Kaiser gives it away.
I didn't know about the Kaiser part. The Hans Gothic, it sounded familiar.
Yeah. So I knew my opponent was skilled. It's just that they failed the deck selection test, which is fine, Sometimes that happens to the best of us. I'm sure it's happened to both you and me.
Wow, Jarvis. Be careful.
No.
Your next words.
It's happened to me many times, especially in Pro Tours, which is literally the worst time to happen,
But I know that I'm failing the deck selection test. I do it willingly and, with enthusiasm.
You do it willingly and with enthusiasm?
Well, I know that I'm likely registering a somewhat dodgy offer or whatever. But
see,
it's
here, sorry. Here I don't even attack because I don't want to give them the option of like. I kind of just want to block their thing if they let me. And look at this Pyroblast. I can Pyro their thing and be generally safe from anything except Force of Will, I guess, is the one problem. But look.
Except
you know what? I'm not going to say I knew it was there because I didn't know what my top card was.
Lucky Jarvis.
Imagine registering a card and then Antiquities War? What kind of goof would do that? Is that
Look,
you?
that card was good. It was just, some of the surrounding cast was not... The supporting cast, excuse me, was, didn't pull that way.
I actually remember reading about the deck. You tricked Scott Lipp into wasting a week testing that deck before Pro Tour 25.
Did I?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. It must have been the other way around.
Oh,
Because,
Scott Lipp tricked you?
well, I must have read the blog on that deck, and then I think I asked you, and
Oh.
you said avoid at all costs.
Oh, yeah. I think I told you to avoid it, and you just didn't listen to me as Britzer wanted.
No, I listened, and then just did something else. I heard
But
exactly
then,
what
did
you
you
said.
really listen? Anyways, Jeweled Amulet is not a playable Magic card. It's the long story of this discussion.
Those 100% should have been Lotus Petals. Yeah.
You don't say. Why? I don't even remember how you got tricked. Besides, you thought the deck looked cool. Probably is what actually happened, right? Right? Can I fast forward through this? This is like, here we go.
Yeah, this is.
Like he was just like AFK or something. I don't know. And now, I don't think my opponent can ever win. Like now, I can just like not even care because I know my top card's garbage. It was a scalding turn, by the way.
It's kind of hard that you can almost engineer it so the Ragavan clears dead cards for you.
Yeah, I mean it's. I think that's a cool mini game. It's just the games where you don't know what's happening. It's really unfun to play against Ragavan because it's so likely you just get like buried by like random cantrips or whatever. I think it's debatable if you actually want this Power Blast by this point.
I would keep it. I figure there's not really a way you can lose between double Pyro Blast and Hydro Blast.
What I was thinking at the time is I can lose if they just play a bunch of green creatures out. But it's kind of hard for them to do that. Oh,
And also, wouldn't they have just done that if
yeah,
they had
I was about to say that's the
Yeah.
real reason I shouldn't have. I should have probably just kept it. Was how is it possible that they have a green card in their hand still? Right? It's basically impossible for that to be the case, right? I don't know what's going on. I think my moto's like. Oh, I wanted to surveil in between, and I had to like undo all of the auto yields. I don't know what happened actually, because it didn't really matter. And yeah, they're dead. All right, cool. Do we take 2 minutes before the next match, real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
Also, if you all appreciate being here, I appreciate all you all being here, 110 of you. If you are new to the stream, you can always smash that follow button. And, I'm glad to have you on here, and we'll be right back for round 5 through 8 review. All right. All right. Have you returned?
All right.
Yep. Figured this one was just dragging a little bit between the Skype reboots and me installing a new client. There was a lot going on this time. All right, this is kind of a looser, but I don't think you can really mulligan this hand either.
It's yeah, these are the hands that I never quite know how to weigh up with a deck like this.
I think it's reluctant keep. And
Yeah, I mean,
then
I guess you have enough filtering that you can almost dig aggressively for a brainstorm to like reset the worst aspects of your draw.
it's actually debatable if I should have played Volk on one. I think there. But
And once that happens, are you meant to fetch Volk again so that you have access to double ponder onto?
I don't know. Like the question is, do I think I'll have to ponder twice
The thing
onto?
is, you almost don't even care about a second wasteland if it comes down to it, right?
Yeah, I do not, because like my mana's accounted for. One thing worth noting is I'm actually very low on fetchables now. So I only have 3 Volk, so I only have 2 fetchable lands left in my deck. I don't know if that actually ends up being an issue this game. I kind of imagine it won't be. But at this point, what do you think they are? It's like kind of a weird, bizarre sequence of plays that they've
Yeah,
made, right?
there was like a slower bug deck that had like a loam and Uro stuff with Wasteland, and I
Yeah.
could see it being that. I know one version had like Elvish Reclaimer and so
Mhm.
on.
This is awkward because I actually missed on a land from my iteration, but like the actual issues, I only have 2 fetchable lands left as well because I've surveilled. I've gotten one wasted and surveilled another into my graveyard. So this is like kind of a dangerous situation in a weird sort of way. And I'm a sucker for value, so or am I a sucker for value?
Uh, as far as I know, you always have been.
Well, the
But
question is, do you play the brainstorm from iteration or do you waste them?
I kind of want to waste them.
Yeah, I think I
And
end up doing that.
I think when you do, I assume Chop is better to waste than Underground Sea.
I'm afraid of Uro, so I think that's basically what I was thinking. And the other thing I'm thinking by this point is, generally speaking, the bug style decks have a really hard time removing 7 drops, right?
Yes.
So yeah, and by doing it this way, I think there's a small chance my opponent has Daze in their deck, so you might as well play around it. Nicator77 asks, when did they color shift Gurmag Angler, make it bigger and give it flying? Great question. I guess this set, Modern Horizons 2.
But Jarvis, it's just Tombstalker. No one plays that. How good could it be?
Oh, I forgot. You two, this was your spoiler, you two, right?
Yes.
And it
yeah.
turns out when
We
you
got a
color
nice
shift it to blue, the answer is it doesn't really have to be. It doesn't have to be better. It can
It
just
could be worse. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The
And
fact that it's blue is what makes it better.
all right. Also, right now I have exactly 1 fetchable left in my deck, but fortunately, 1 is all I need, right? But now I have 0 left. So
Yeah, I mean, this was maybe a case for do you think Daze is more likely than the first regent dying or getting forced and then needing to cast a second one, being a little bit low on delve fodder, but mainnet
I don't
carpet,
know.
okay.
Yeah. So this, I do not like those bug decks. And wow, this is an unreal beating.
Oh, gross. Oh, it hits both? Jesus.
Yeah. Do you know it's a
And they're both
human
humans.
I think they're actually both human wizard. Oh, actually, the other one might be human shaman. That is not so good versus that card. I'm not gonna lie.
Please tell me this gigantic dragon just solos them anyway.
Yeah,
I guess we're about to find out.
Yeah, we are about to find out. Like, I don't think this game lasts much longer, one or the other. Because if this thing doesn't finish them, I think I'm so low in resources, I'm probably gonna lose. Right?
Yeah.
I think I shuffled that ponder because I determined it was not actually good enough to win with.
So what are you hoping to draw instead?
I don't know, like cantrips, more threats. Like, I don't think Force Bolt is good enough versus that deck on average.
Is there a case for gut shotting them just so the region is bigger?
I thought about that. Actually, they would be at. They would have been at 12. Actually, I should have because that's between the fetch and whatever. But yeah, now I'm just mostly dead because I've already used my 1 main deck Power Blast, and they have enough to redelve next turn that I think is basically inescapable unless if I draw a Regent this turn. Because the weird thing about Regent is if you actually play another Regent with having one in play, it pumps your first one.
Yeah.
Which I'm
And
sure
that's
you know about since it was your
we went
preview
over
card.
that. Yeah, and that makes it a little easier, I think, to
Yeah.
justify playing so many copies. Where I
Yeah.
mean, generally, if you have two regents uncontested, you're going to win the game regardless. But the fact that you just like suddenly fireball them out of nowhere with the second one is pretty hot.
Yeah, but instead this game, Uro does Uro things, which means I'm probably dead. So yeah, I don't think the whale is great, but my gut shot gets to do something, which is this is really not a gut shot matchup. But I pack it in at another land. I mean, like I guess no. Actually, I'm losing the race and the gain 3, and if I draw a brainstorm, it's not even that good. So yeah, I kind of give up. Again, what I was saying about Vortex versus Quathis certainly applies here. I think Quathis would be so much better versus their deck.
Yeah, definitely. If only just for the application against Uro, right?
Well, also they're bug. They're not Bant. They don't have prismatic ending.
Yeah, yeah.
So I generally do not like having that many lightning bolts versus a deck like that. And I'm also thinking about Plague Engineer, trying to like maybe not be so vulnerable to it, but it's kind of hard to balance everything, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I decide 2 bolts. The small ball removal is not good. You can shave 2 forces once you have so many blasts. And this is like fine. It's not exciting, and I'm just like, well, if I lose with this hand, I lose. It's not a big deal.
I think this hand is fine. I mean, it's awkward that it's a 6-card hand, but
yeah. Oh no, it was a 7-card hand. I didn't mulligan or what?
Okay. I thought you
No,
had that for a
I'm
sec.
just like it's not exciting, like you know. But now this hand's super exciting to me. All right, I guess we're going to at the very end of this we'll have to address days and other topics, won't we?
Any consideration to dazing that ponder?
No.
Like once, I mean, I guess once they wasteland you, maybe that points in the direction of them, not needing the mana souls quite as much. But
Nah, we're here to dash. So if you daze, you don't get to dash the Ragavan.
is dashing it that important versus just establishing it in play?
Yeah, I think it's safer. Plus, you guarantee some amount of value, which well, that's not it. But the treasure, I think, is actually relevant here. Yo, you know what I got? I got regents for days, son. I'm like, all right, I guess you got me. One question I have for you: do you think that card is good?
Which one?
Split second diabolic edict.
Mm, I don't think it actually. I think its main application is like against a deck like Delver, you just kill their one threat for free. But I don't think that the split second often does much in terms of
Yeah.
it catches a creature, whereas Liliana's Triumph or something wouldn't.
I think it's basically the same as every other edict, with weird corner cases being like fetch for Dried Arbor versus Merit Age /
Right.
Edict. In which case, I guess it's like a slight upgrade, but I don't think Diabolic Edicts are that good in Legacy, is how I would actually put it.
Also, for the most part, if they're worried about that, they can just play around it by fetching the Arbor in advance, and then, I do remember, so back when Time Spiral was first coming out, there were people saying things like, oh, Secure Tribuilder is now unplayable in Extended because of Sudden Shock.
Yeah, that
And it's
didn't
like,
make
well,
any sense. Yeah.
It's always just a random growth. It's identical if you want it to be. But if they don't have the Sudden Shock or they're just a different deck, then it's much better. So just like a lack of basic thought going into that analysis.
But wait, I didn't mention it. The reason I forced the carpet was to play around in their Sudden Edict. Because just imagine if I let Carpet resolve and they just force, or and they just Sudden Edict me, I probably lose this game. And that's also why I just cast Lightning Bolt there instead of doing if I Pyroblast their blocker and they sudden edict me and just Uro, then I'm like suddenly in not very good position where like the game looked almost unlosable by that point, you know?
Yeah.
Basically, I don't think it really mattered what I did, except I was trying to imagine like a terrible scenario for things to go wrong.
Something I like to do, just lying in bed every night, pondering the future of the world.
Existential dread is how I put it in a tweet this morning.
Something like that.
It's very British of you. This is like actually, it's hard to say that this is on the low end of hands because it has a Brainstorm, right? But I actually am not. I think this is on the low end of keepable. Maybe it's in like the middle, actually.
That seems okay to me.
Yeah, it's hard to say no to a 2-lander with Brainstorm and 3 1-drops, right?
Yeah, and this surgical right now is kind of burning a hole in your pocket, but very easily could be the one thing that you need to escape from Uro.
Love what you did there. Can we talk about how good you are at being a Brit? Even though you are Canadian, I'm like, wow. I actually had not seen many people play that card, but it's unreal good here.
Oh, it's so good, yeah.
I think when you get to cast it and not get dazed, it's unbelievably good.
That's another card that makes a lot more sense in the world of X ones, right? Just like murk your thing, get back a fetch land.
Yeah. So I could have played the Ragavan and it actually would have dodged Plague Engineer, but what I'm actually thinking right now is what if they just have something like Toxic Deluge for 1 or something. So, and here we see, well, I'm honestly kind of sick of this card, not because like I think it's that good or anything. It's just kind of infuriating that people have decided that Giant Spider is suddenly a good card. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are getting a little too wrapped up in the hype over this thing. Like, I'm sure it can be good against Delver, but it's not like a reason to. This is a kind of thing where people like to tell themselves they have a good Delver matchup, and they'll cite cards like this as a reason why, right? Even when they shouldn't.
But one thing I will note, them having Tarmogoyf and Endurance in their deck, I actually think this person is like ready to fight.
Yes.
And I'm like, I checked at this point. I don't have any Submerges in my deck right now, so it's going to be actually really hard to get past these 3/4s. And one thing I absolutely do not want to do is give this Channeler Delirium, because it just is forced to, attack itself to death.
And so right now we have
instant creature land.
Sorcery, basically. Yeah. I mean, that's okay insofar as we don't have a sorcery yet, but...
And now I feel like I mostly feel dead this game.
Yeah.
Like, the way I win this game, I think, is to draw a Regent ASAP. And yeah, I'm just I can never block there, because what if they just have anything?
And it has to be soon, right? Because these Tarmogoyfs are getting pretty large.
So I almost did the bad thing where I need to fetch first because I think I know what's on top from Brainstorm. And here goes what the doctor ordered. So I think the way I win is by suiciding one creature this turn, getting a bunch of damage in, and /or... Whoa, this helps a lot, actually. If they're just going to, do this. Penumbra Spider? Don't... Why are we talking about cards that I can't beat? Actually, Penumbra Spider is less scary because it doesn't block 3/3s very well.
Now, Jarvis, let's talk about shifting Ceratops for a second.
I've seen people play that one, and now I think it's, kind of a joke. But I kind of thought it was a joke before because it's not that easy to cast, but it's also not that good versus the Rug variants when people actually play that stuff,
Or even just like Grixis with Gomag Angler or whatever. Playing Engineer.
So, the real reason I cast is Surgical? It's Battle Growth, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Can you respect a good Battle Growth thing?
Oh, I love it. Look, I played Scales this weekend. I understand wanting to throw cards into the void just to get some counters.
Oh, to be fair, when you play that deck, it's worth 2 or 3 counters. Let's be fair.
Yes.
8-8! So now we're getting to a range. If my opponent does something dumb, I can top deck a Bolt and kill them. But that's kind of shutting me down. Like, but you know what? The Regent hasn't died yet, so now I'm just gonna try to push damage and hope for the best. So you could make a case that I'm supposed to attack with both to just bluff Lightning Bolt. But I think that means I die to removal if I do that. So it's not like a free bluff, right?
Right.
But you could also make a case that removal is so bad for me anyways that maybe I'm supposed to do it.
Well, it depends on what the removal spell is, right?
Right.
If it's something that would only hit one of the smaller creatures, then
Like that?
Yeah, then
Well, no. If I don't sacrifice the Regent, don't I die?
oh geez, yeah.
So now I have to top deck Lightning Bolt. Oh my god, it's Lightning Bolt!
Jarvis, you noob lucker.
Oh my god. And with no permanents in play except lands. Lightning Bolt off the top, and here's the kicker. I only left in 2 Lightning Bolts because I don't think it's that good versus. Is that a new book or MTGO premium thing right there?
That's a Jarvis clap situation, if you ask me.
Jarvis clap. I have to say, watching this in VLC is better than the Moto replay, now that everything's set up. Now that we have the correct thing going.
Oh, I guess Jarvis Shock also quite applicable here.
Jarvis Bolt?
Jarvis Shock.
Oh, but it wasn't a Shock, it was a Bolt, because Shock would have only left them at 1.
Now that's a Jarvis math situation, that one is.
That is. So Dimax, Bart Van Etten, I believe.
Yeah, Doomsday Crusher in Vintage, right?
Yeah, but here I don't know what they're playing. They could be playing anything. I think they have a slight tendency to play control decks, so I kind of think they're Honorarch Bant, and I'm not thrilled about this pairing. But as hands go versus Honorarch Bant, this is like premium, you know. And this certainly looks like it could be Honorarch Bant or like Omnitel, or yeah. I guess they technically could be a mirror.
Yeah, if they were smart enough to have the Snowlands when we're not.
Who knew worked better, me or Dom's opponent misclicking the top 8? Dom, I think, knew worked a little bit better. But it is close, right, Dom?
Oh, it's definitely me. I noob lucked much harder. Much noobier, much luckier.
Anyways, we got the pressure going. We got 2 Fugitive Wizards getting in the red zone. How do you love Fugitive Wizard as a card?
I could take or leave it. I love a good Sage of Epity, Jarvis.
How about Scornful Egotist?
Sure. I think that sounds me out very well.
That one's really good with Torrent of Flame or Rush of Knowledge.
Rush of Knowledge, yeah. Blast of Genius.
So now I think, all right, what I actually feel like is that there's soft to Wasteland. So if I have a Waste, I probably just,
So you're keen to iteration here and then.
Yeah, if I hit a Waste, it just. And look at that. I think you put Brainstorm in your hand, by the way.
Agreed.
I actually don't think Wasteland's that good versus Bant on average, especially if they're playing carpets and shit, but there it's clear to me that they're soft in terms of their mana development,
Why precisely there?
Because they brainstormed and didn't get to shuffle in between.
Sure, and yeah, ideally they'd want to fetch a basic to ending, yeah.
Exactly. So it just means they either have a bunch of duels or they're even land light, so everything's looking great. But I choose to play the Channeler because I think it's slightly better versus a possible sweeper to do that. And if I need to bolt, then I can get some value out of the the Surveil. And I think I do end up doing that. Now, this Uro is kind of scary, because like I mentioned, one of the problems for a deck like this is Uro is extremely, extremely tough to beat in like a prolonged
Although
game.
at this point we're gonna make a big dragon, have force backup. We have 2 flyers. Oh, I guess we have 1 flyer right now, but
And I decided to force back because I think also just getting to Surveil is worth something, and it's such a big creature, and they can't Terminus this turn. Forget, what do they end up thinking about here? It's like Abundant Harvest, I think. Yeah, and I don't know. Abundant Harvest is not exactly free in the deck. I will say that as well.
do you think it is actually better than just playing more preordains, for example, or is
I don't
this
know. Like,
just experimentation with a new card? Which I guess is kind of an old card at this
no,
point, right?
Onrock has been high on it forever, and I can't tell because there are certainly situations where like you need a land and that's all that matters. Then Harvest is very good at doing that, right? I was trying to figure out what them blocking my Delver meant over Channeler. I guess it doesn't really mean anything, right? And look at this. Pyroblast, my main deck Pyroblast, it's going to be good versus Uro, don't you think? Jarvis clap for the Pyroblast? So I want to put a caveat about this matchup, which I think can't be understated. I think Bant is favored if it gets to develop its mana, but look at how this game played out, right? And look at that. Did you see what happened there, Dom?
What?
They endurance targeting me. 3 region triggers went on the stack, but didn't actually matter because that region was lethal anyways.
Oh, geez.
So I guess the reason they did that was it also
well,
prevents me
if
from
they
getting
have
Dorium,
to,
right? Yeah.
yeah, if they have to try and block the region regardless, then
Yep.
may as well shrink the channel while you're there.
Right. Because I was close to Delirium, so and that would have been good. But I think I actually managed to get Delirium this turn, which is kind of insane if you think about it.
Oh wow, yeah. So
if you put
you
the
have creature
land on
instant,
top, yeah.
or even if you don't, right? If you draw the land, yeah. I guess you'd rather surveil it at this point.
So I just insta Delirium from having 0 cards, right?
Insane.
Nice endurance. Yeah, actually, in retrospect, I guess it actually is correct for them to target me with the endurance, right? At the time, I thought that maybe it was a mistake, but now thinking about it more, I think I was just way off base, right? So, I was thinking about these submerges and I couldn't decide still because it's just so bad. Do you think you would have sided in Submerge knowing that they have Endurance and Uro and Coatl?
I think I maybe would actually, yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's such a bad card versus them because like the matchup really isn't about that. And I think I decided to side out of Wasteland, which I think is defensible. Even though Wasteland was really good in that last game, but I think it generally is not going to be as good as it was in that last game, generally speaking,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's a little bit dodgy.
I think you kind of have to mulligan this.
Yeah, this hand's much better. The problem is, I think blind. Actually, even blind, I don't think that hand's good. So I don't know. So I actually decided to keep both Ragavans because it forces them to have 2 removal spells for both Ragavans. And I'm low on resources, so I decide not to fight the carpet because I think that's just asking for trouble. Yeah, Wasteland probably heavily drops off after they have 4 carpet. That's a good point. I think it is interesting if you're supposed to bottom Ragavan or the other card that I bottomed, whatever it was. But kind of just thought that if I have untracked Ragavan versus Bant, I'm probably winning. Was my thought process, I think.
I like that. Yeah.
And here I'm just I cannot force this faster, I think, because like it's going to be this endurance is just going to be an issue all game, right? Plow is kind of a funny one in that I do not want to cast that, but I guess I've accounted for one of their 4 plows now. And the way I decided on 3 Wasteland was I wanted to play 18 lands because my curve is really low, and I wanted 14 blue sources. So once you arrive at those numbers, it basically ends up you can only play 3 Wasteland if you want to play the basic mountain as well. Which I do.
Is there any merit to sideboarding the 4th, do you think?
Yeah, there is, actually. Do I need to play that island?
I don't think you do.
Yeah, maybe I should have held it.
I also think it's fairly low downside because, like, let's say they don't do anything you need to handle this turn. If you get to untap and let's say Brainstorm into a vet or something, then maybe the treasure token has some value.
The real issue is the carpet. Actually, it's not low downside.
Oh, of course.
It's actually high. I think that's actually what was being discussed.
Yeah, in
actually,
case,
I think it was really bad. Actually, now that I think about it, and also now I could have brainstormed it away and just fetched a mountain, which would have been much better. Fortunately, my deck loves me, and I get to just like draw real cards instead of lands. I guess getting the surveil away the Ragavan was just so nice as well, I decided to ship the Delver because I don't think Delver's going to do much this game, right? Like, I don't have any setup for it. Ooh, I could play this carpet. Does that do anything? Not really? Yeah, so I think I just decide not to. What would playing carpet there do?
Nothing, right? Because this turn they only have 1 island, so...
Here's Terminus. I'm like, okay, well, at least I can play a 3-1 end step, right? To just continue the damage output. Something that I noticed a lot in the games I played with this deck is this deck floods very easily because all of your cards are so cheap that it kind of doesn't matter if you just spew treasures because it's not like you're going to do anything effective with them, right?
And there's no good mana sink or anything either.
No. That was perhaps the other reason to keep the island, so I could brainstorm that back instead. As well, if I drew a brainstorm or something like that, So, by this point, I kind of feel like I'm not doing great, Like, they have a lot of mana. They have this Uro, which is going to be a problem. And, like, I'm priced into blasting it. So now I have to hope that they can never re-up in there, and they have 4. So now I'm just like, okay, I'm probably dead. Well, let's see what happens. Maybe I have a good one. And I top deck a Pyroblast. PogChamp, chat! PogChamp! The only way you can win this matchup is to run really hot, and I also fetched the wrong land. I don't want anyone to notice that, but I should have fetched Mountain 100% of the time there.
Yep. Sure should have.
And, Bant sucks. You heard it here first.
Are you sure that, like, exactly 4 Pyroblast is the number you want? I know we've been over this before, but...
I'm not sure, but I still thought people would play Elves and shit, so I don't know. You still need room for other decks, hypothetically. Or this is going to come up in round 8 where I play a deck that Fireblast is literally dead against. So
Isn't this how the last run ended too? Just getting walloped by death and taxes.
I don't know what you're talking about. That didn't happen. No, what? Was it Death and Taxes in the April Showcase top 8? Okay, let's talk something about this. I showed Daniel my deck list, and he didn't show me his, so I think that was unfair at this point.
The Goldu cat himself.
I
And
think
also, you really need. It's even more unfair because Daniel's list is sure to have some cosmic brained nonsense inside it.
if you go look at his list, I think it's very structurally unsound for a lot of reasons. But
Why? I mean, you would always say that, but why this time?
he had 10 fetch lands, 4 volcanic, and like 1 island or some unbelievable nonsense, and no basic mountain. It was like, what the hell is going on? I don't know. Yeah, but that mana base was bad. Like, it's unbelievable that you didn't play a mountain first off. Also, did we lose you again?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
look,
Daniel, you don't have to listen to Zoomers. You can think for yourself. You can just like analyze the mana base and see if it actually makes any sense.
Daniel and Wombo is the dream ticket. I would vote for that platform.
Oh, I would absolutely no sir it because they will just say things that make no sense and bamboozle people into believing them.
Have you met me before? That's exactly my motto. I'm envious of them.
Well, I do not operate that way. You know that. It's 2 free for the boat. What the fuck does that mean? Does it mean anything? Anyways, decide to keep this hand. You basically just want to keep any hand in mirrors. And here we go. We have Ragavan plus Days on the play in the Demir. I don't know why he tapped out. And yeah, we're just going to try to pummel them. Because what else am I going to do with this? This is kind of fine. It just resets the game to where it is. Defense so I don't lose a surgical, but I have Island Mountain in my deck. I wouldn't even lose a surgical. What the hell's going on? Am I getting trolled by chat?
Is this the Ozymandias, or is it one of the 1,717 on Ozymandiases out there? At least there could be more. We don't know.
I think
you just know there are this many.
I think this is the Ozymandias that plays a lot of Legacy on MTGO. I guess that didn't really clarify anything, did it? Because aren't there multiple Ozymandiases running around in the Legacy queues?
It sure looks that way.
Anyways, somehow Ragavan is actually the perfect draw. Was I supposed to dash it there? I guess I was. And look at this, I get to just free roll a Channeler, and like, it's really, really hard to come back from this, I think. I've lost to Ozymandias playing Force Elam more than once, and I'm not too proud to admit it. Is that the correct wording for that statement? Sometimes I get confused by English. I leave the Englishing to you, Dom. Because, you know, the joke is you are English.
Oh, that was a joke?
I don't know. What was it a good one? Anyways,
well, not for me to say.
Anyways, I just snap off the waist there. I'm not sure if that's even right.
I think you have to, for sure.
It kind of feels like he's soft here. I don't know why. It just feels that way. And they bottomed with both. I'm just like, well, I'm just gonna like see if this Ragavan ends them.
Play the land first, please.
Yeah.
There we go. Yep.
No reason to turn their Days on. And you know what I get to do here?
Oh, we do. Oh, jeez.
No! Daniel didn't let me have my fun! That's BS!
Jarvis, if we have a treasure token in the graveyard, does it count towards delirium?
Yes, absolutely yes. By the way, nowadays Force of Will is just like not necessary in these matchups, especially with how many rules we're playing, in my opinion. I think I side out all my forces and just side in anything that says kill a creature on it, essentially, except a Braid. I don't think a Braid's that good. Like, imagine trading 2 mana for 1 mana. That's just like not a very good exchange. Would you call that tempo negative?
Tempo was just fake news, Jarvis.
No, it's not. It's actually a real term and it means something. Well, first off, I was just never going to side in Surgical versus you. Anyways, this hand's like exactly fine, but not the best. There's certainly issues with this hand. Ah, yes, I rolled the dice. How do you feel about rolling the dice right there?
Again, it's like, what is that wasteland doing other than just attacking their mana, right? It's not helping you cast any spells.
All right. Can you spot the mistake?
Oh, you should have used Misty. Yeah.
Yeah,
why
the fuck did I use Scalding Card? This is horrible too, because now I don't. That's really bad.
It's potentially very costly and strictly worse than the alternative.
Yeah. Why did I do that? Oh my god. I think I regret it immediately, and then I just started hovering over this Misty. I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Ozymandias says Ruin Crab is a great way to block Ragavan and makes your surgical better. Can't tell if he's trolling or not. I should just automatically assume that's a troll, right?
I think it's a serious question. Or comment.
Do you really? Ruin Crab?
Maybe I'm trolling you, Jarvis. Who's to say?
Why do I put up with this nonsense? Oh, this is a good point. No, it's not a troll, it's a crab. That's really the perfect response. I can't imagine a more perfect response than that. What is Aegis? Is that the 0-4 for a single blue for standard? Aegis Turtle? It's probably an 0-4 for blue in Ikoria, right?
0-5, Jesus.
Oh, you know, it was a plant for mutate, wasn't it? Like, in limited, you were supposed to be able to mutate on it, and people just realized that...
It's not a plant, it's a turtle.
I just got again! How is this possible? And, you know what? We're gonna have to just speed this up. This is awful. This is Daniel being Daniel. And if you don't know what I mean by that, you just have to... Okay, well, finally something happened. You know what I mean by that, right?
Look, his brain is busy ascending to a higher plane. You just gotta give him some time.
Fortunately, I'm a lucker noob and drew another Scalding Tarn, so I'm never punished by my mistakes. That's noob lucker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I'm 100% dead in the meme bracket. It's not even close. So, what did you think of not playing the second 1-drop there?
Does Jarvis need you right this second?
Yes.
You have a cat emergency?
I mean, there's always a cat emergency, but he'll be fine. He's just being a baby.
Well, but the question I had for you is, do you play the another 1-drop here? Because there's some serious risks to doing that.
Namely...
Well, have you heard of this card that's spelled V-O-L-L-E-Y?
Ah, I see. How concerned are you with that card at this point?
like it's already bad for me. Like the question is, do I even want to make it better? And the other concern is I would not be able to like daze potentially. Like, what if they just went cantrip fetch and then played a regent? I wouldn't be able to daze it if I tapped out, like without falling prey to their daze.
Yeah, it's tricky. The thing is, it's not like if Daniel has a regent, there's not going to be some kind of multi-stage fight over it, right? It's
Right.
not like he casts regent, you cast something, and then he gets to do something back. So, I don't know how much of a concern that is. I think I would just cast a channeler. You know, playing around probably a one-off volley.
It's 1 or 2 generally, yeah.
Yeah, and having to really delay your own development to do that, especially with how much channeler boosts all of the other spells that you might cast. I think it's worth doing it here.
Well, the other reason, like someone just pointed out in the chat, is you get like a free scry from this if you wait as well. So I don't know if how much that's actually worth to you.
I mean, that is a fair point. I think it's close. I think I would do it, but I see the counter argument.
So we'll continue on this match, which actually ends up lasting quite a while, which is... So I think game 1 tends to be relatively quick, but the post-board games, people, like I said, have 1,000 removal spells. So it's like hard to actually end a game quickly. And here's a Chain Lightning, and I'm like, okay, where this is Chain Lightning, I have Gutshot or Forked Bolt, so I'm just like... I'm so glad it's not either of those. Speaking of Gutshot...
Ooh!
I didn't even know that was there.
It always just sneaks up on you.
Daniel says, I'm going to mess up 2 turns from now. Wow. Spoiler, Daniel. Spoiler. So, hold on. Am I supposed to pay life for this Gutshot, or am I supposed to fetch a Volcanic to hardcast it? I was trying to figure this out forever. I don't know the answer.
Are you planning to iteration this turn?
No, but my concern is like getting my land wasted so I can't cast Regent in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to really cast Iteration this turn because that's really weak to Daze. And I do think I have to Gutshot in response to Surveil, because look, there's already, if they just Surveil a creature, it's like impossible to kill that thing with what I have going on. I think I've convinced myself that I'm not supposed to fetch Volk for that reason. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't have a good intuition for spots like this, although I think I agree with you.
Yeah, so let it ride. So I Gutshot, and everything's dead, but I have still this floating. And yeah, I'm wasting 2 mana, but I don't think that actually matters, because I think, based on how I describe the matchup, there's going to be a window to spend 2 mana later and get to play around stuff, because, like I said, I think people just are so flushed with the removal that it works out. And the question is, do you fetch first or not? I guess you don't really have to make that decision yet. I think they're blasting, and I get to Daze, which is kind of convenient. Because it's like, it's hard to foresee where Daze is going to be good for someone who has 4 lands, right? In this matchup. Daniel said he thought I had already played a land, so he got blown out by Daze because I get to replay my land. Huh. And I think I just keep the Hydro, just like reduce variance, and you know, I have everything I need to win a game. But this game's gonna go really long because like I have another iteration. He probably has a bunch of removal. I have to kill this. if it gets countered, then like it's kind of awful. But I have a Hydroblast, but Hydroblast doesn't counter most of the counters on my Pyro. And the question is if the Bolt's good, and I like eventually determined that Bolt's probably good enough on average. So I'm supposed to keep it. Oh, I think maybe playing that iteration to Days was super loose.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't really have much to offer at this point, but it's just
No, here we're basically in the Jun part of the game where I'm going to play a threat, see if he has an answer. He's going to play a threat, see if I have an answer, and it's like kind of straightforward mid-range Magic by this point, right? Like this is not the interesting part. I guess the only question was should I have played around Days, and the other question was I supposed to wait for a third blue source to play with Hydro backup for a Pyroblast? I don't know the answers to any of those questions. I think I actually end up losing this game, which looks kind of wild, right? Like,
yeah, and so that's when you start thinking like,
yeah,
if I just played it slower with the iteration, not run it into Days,
yeah. Oh no, it's another Daniel. Okay, let's just say it was another Daniel tank. Also, when he brainstorms into Brainstorm here, I feel really far ahead because that's really not a good use of Brainstorm, right? I'm just like, how the hell do I lose this? This is just like WTF, mate, you know? Do I need to fast forward? I don't remember. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. The answer continues to be yes. Oh, wait. Hold on. Okay. Finally, something happened. So obviously I'm just looking for like another threat or anything. I mean, I don't feel too bad about my spot still. I'm ahead in the damage race. Unfortunately, that lines up well versus my hand, so now things get scary. They hit a Ragavan of mine. So now the question is, do you play that Ragavan? We saw someone last game played it, and I don't know if you're supposed to play it. You're about to tank for 3 minutes? Oh my god, why? He wasn't actually exaggerating. Wait, was the tank, do I cast Brainstorm? And I'm obviously blasting that if that's the last card. I actually do think you should play the Ragavan there because if I have another Ragavan and they, get something out of it.
There's no reason not to unless you're worried about
Yeah.
petty theft, right?
Yeah, and I actually daze here just to surveil because I'm thinking to myself, if I find a bolt, this game is over. If I find selection to dig closer for a bolt, what the hell is Daze going to do this game? Like, almost nothing, right? So you might as well turn it into Scry 1 or Surveil 1.
That makes sense.
And also, if you pick it up, you protect it from Wasteland too, but that's like less of a deal. Alright, and now I'm like, okay, this is really bad. I have to top deck. That's not it. But maybe it buys me a turn? Why did I replay the Outland? Also, here I'm thinking if I don't block and I flip a spell to Delver, I can win. So you might as well just not block and hope for the best. It's Polluted Delta. And now I'm just like, I think I'm Lou now. Well, I'm not actually Lou, but it's like pretty awful. I think this is the exact spot where I start thinking about that 2 damage from Gut Shot. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the life totals, it's very convenient that I'm at 5 life. But it kind of that lightning bolt was going to be too hard to beat, even if I had 2 more life, unless my top card was bolt. So,
And even if it's not bolt, like any creature still puts you in a tough position. You know,
yeah. I think I'm satisfied. Like, I don't think play versus draw actually matters that much with regards to how to use sideboard in this matchup, especially if you have a bunch of blasts, because blasts are just so efficient at their job. Period. You know. Kind of nice that I just auto assume that Daniel takes forever, so I can just fast forward some of this shit. Alright, well, that hand sucks. This hand's fine. I think you just bottom the Regent, right?
I kind of want to bottom the Wasteland.
That's not unreasonable, too. And this is a game where I really don't want to get wasted off, but the problem is days again, right? Like, I don't know. I'm not sure if I should fetch Volk or not. I suspect I'm not supposed to because I have the Mountain in my hand. Because, like, think about it. Mountain actually makes fetching a Volk much worse, right?
Yeah, like you don't want to get wasted off your only blue source. Whereas if it's an island, maybe it's a little more justifiable.
Right. Oh my god, I think he's tanking for like 7 years again.
Daniel!
Right. Well, I can't daze that one, and now this Wasteland kind of seems okay to me, but obviously, like, I'm just introducing more variants. It's just I have so many lands in my hand that I'm happy to trade Wasteland, you know? Alright, well, drawing a creature is actually pretty good there, because, like, there's a big worry that if I don't do anything for a while, that the game just gets away from me pretty easily. And, yeah, I think you just have to daze this Bolt, even though, like, it's not exciting, but there's a chance that daze goes dead very quickly as well, right? Like, we've discussed how many 1-mana spells this current iteration has. I don't know. Would you have daze there?
Yeah, I think so. The issue is, I don't think Daniel's going to run any kind of premium 2-drop into days.
Right.
And so you're hoping he just makes like 2 plays in 1 turn, or...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think dazing makes sense.
It's a Ragavan standoff. Who's going to be the Ragavaner and who's going to be the Ragavanee? I've expressed quite a bit about this current iteration, yes? In fact, one could argue that we've been expressing way too much about this current iteration. Would you say that?
I might.
This is just kind of egregious. If this happened IRL, I think I'd have called a judge on Daniel like 7 times by now. I'm not even joking because, like, I don't know how to put it. Daniel's my friend, but he takes way too long to think sometimes.
I mean, when your thoughts are that good, then, you know, it's worth the wait.
Is it? Anyways, I think you just have to play a Regent there and just hope nothing bad happens because, like, your hand has literally no other plan. Yeah, that's MTGO, though. That's fair. Anyways, if he plays his own Regent, you're not even supposed to blast on the stack. You should just untap and blast it to play around days, obviously. And I think that's what's happening here. Why did he leave a bolt in the graveyard? And why didn't I get wasted as well? I have so many questions. What happened on that turn cycle? Yeah, that's fair, Oysterg. I'm just like, what the fuck is this? Why is this in the deck? But the actual issue is I actually have to pyro it because I'm ahead on board. Because, like, the effect of not pyroing that is it introduces a lot of variance into the game, right?
Oh, Daniel said, yeah, so we see Court of Cunning. What do you make of bringing that card in the
Hate
matchup?
it. It's just so volatile. You don't know what's going to fucking happen in these mirrors with it.
it feels hard to resolve, and then also like if the game flips in a turn to put you behind, like that might just be game over, right?
Mm-hmm. So now we're in a good old-fashioned damage race. And I don't know what's going to happen. I finally get wasted. I don't know who's favored from here. I think I'm slightly favored, but obviously it could like go south real quickly. But here appears to be another regent. So it's just like, well, now I'm no longer favored, obviously. I think his regent's bigger too. 1, 2. Yeah, it's a 5/5. Wait, how did you double away the wrong cards? Oh, he doesn't have delirium.
Huh.
And you know what? I get rewarded by drawing a regent of my own. And I don't have to play around days because
Empty-handed,
card,
and other
yeah.
one gets even bigger too.
No, I don't think it's worth it because I don't like any cantrip just gets so bad for me. So I'm trying to remember what I was thinking here. Am I supposed to daze this or not? I eventually conclude that I don't think dazing it does very much. Where most people play chain lightning, I play gut shot. And look at the chat. I take
Perfect. What was the flip-flop, Jarvis, for like maximum feel bads?
Oh my gosh! He put gut shot where most people play chain lightning or something else. I don't know. It's just oh. I scammed him real good, right? He also only had 58 seconds left on his clock, so I think he scammed most of my life play there in that match.
Jeez.
Alright, we only have one more match left, and fortunately for you, this is a quick one. This is only 18 minutes.
Good.
So, this person's playing Death and Taxes. My deck is not particularly well configured versus Death and Taxes. I also don't... Oh, actually, I talked to Tommy, and Tommy told me that they lost to this person, and that they were playing Taxes, so I knew. I think you just have to keep this hand because you have a Bolt, a Delver, and a Brainstorm. Even though like the Ragavans are not particularly good in this matchup, in my opinion, especially on the draw. I don't know what I'm looking at there. No, I think Gutshot is good. I already explained why I thought it was good, but you know, do what you want. Oh god, they're also a tanker. And this Aether Vial is like, well, I hope I don't draw any counters now. Because, like, you know what's really miserable? Drawing counters versus a resolved Aether Vial.
Yeah.
How many times have you done that in your life?
I'm usually not. I'm usually the one playing the Ether Vial rather than the counters. But,
yeah, that's true. I am
and
very...
at least in Modern, you have stuff like Archmage's Charm, which sometimes can kind of like flip the script on them. But
well, I guess you can, but it's not that exciting.
The most recent set roulette, actually, the best deck by far was Merfolk, which often had. I mean, all the lists had Ether Vial, and a lot of them had either Daze and or Cryptic Command. So you get in some really weird spots in those mirrors.
So interesting enough, I could have played a Ragavan there, but I was just like, well, if they have Mother of Runes on this turn cycle, the Ragavan's bad, and I'm going to be prisoned out from my removal spells being good, so you might as well just not play the Ragavan that turn. And I get paid off because they do have the Mother of Runes. Why didn't I play Ragavan turn 1? Because I just think it's so likely to get bricked by Athalia or something, you know? Are you at a disadvantage if you're not playing a deck with red these days? What do you mean? Like that question's kind of vague. Dom, like, do you have any input into that?
Well, our opponent is beating the shit out of us with mono white cards, so that is the best color in Magic. Oh, jeez. Sheesh. Jarvis.
Can I say again?
Go for it. As much as you want, my friend.
I'm basically dead now. Like, it's just. I actually have to kill the Stoneforge because I don't think I can beat like a random Batterskull hopping out this turn either. I do get to shuffle away the Ragavans, I guess, so small victories.
Okay, I've seen enough. We could.
The game only lasted one more turn. Anyways, Force Mitigation sucks. Ragavan, I don't like, and the Pyroblast obviously is nonsense.
Is there a case for Meltdown? Like, I see you mousing over it, but
I think I decide that two Ragavans are actually better than Meltdown, but it's like kind of a wash. They're both pretty awful.
it's not a great spot to have to decide.
Oh, you're playing Blue Black Ninjas? Yeah, I would. So, funnily enough, Tommy won like a bunch of matches playing Blue Black Ninjas, and then he played against Blue Red Delver, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm not playing Ninjas anymore. I'm playing Blue Red Delver." I think that's literally what happened to him.
Which opens up the question of what was he playing against that whole time that he didn't get paired against Delver, but...
Well, I think it was right after MH2 got printed that he continued trying it.
Sure.
Does that make more sense?
Yeah.
So, this is kind of a weird ponder. I think you're supposed to keep because you can kill all their stuff, but there's also a way that you could just instantly lose with this hand, you know?
I kind of want to keep just for the island. Is that weird? Like that's the biggest draw of that ponder to me.
Well, I think between the bolt and the island, the two bolts on the island that you're probably supposed to keep, and just like, well, you run into the issue that your hand's extremely reactive, and you kind of hope that you don't get like bulldozed by like the actual nightmare. I think would be pre-late on one. Like,
oh geez,
that would actually be GG. However, I think most D&T players would not slam it on turn 3 because of the risk of getting dazed, right? The port I don't really care about. Like, I have so much mana as it is that I can also waste the port, which is kind of nice. I decide wasting the port is better than... There's a fail case on this Brainstorm that if you don't Brainstorm into a fetch on that turn, it's like really disastrous, right? And I'm probably going to want to kill the port because it messes with me so much that you might as well just take that turn to do it. So we're building up to the game plan. The game plan is big Murph Regent and hope that you can protect it, but I didn't draw protection for it. Obviously, I only have 4 forces, but I actually think an easy way to win this matchup is to just force a plow on your Regent and just try to kill them with it, you know? Why are we spamming Jotun Grunt? Why is that even...
I love a good Jotun Grunt.
I'm just reminded of Low Key, which is on Disney Plus now. What am I trying to decide about this Brainstorm? I guess I'm trying to decide what cards I want to put back because almost all my cards are good. Right?
Yeah, so I assume you want to... Yeah, we want to go for Channeler this turn, and we kind of want to draw the rest. We're happy if this eats a plow, so I think this is fine.
Yeah. Jotun Grunt greater than Lightning Bolt? So this is kind of weird. What am I supposed to do here? I don't really know. I think I decide that surveilling a bolt away is good. I'm not even sure about this. This is kind of crazy, right? Like, it kind of ended really not good for me to do that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck was going on there?
The thing is, if they're not playing any creatures or anything else, then their hand kind of has to be at least one plow, right?
Yeah.
So this region probably is not long for this mod either, but you don't really have a better line than jamming it and hoping for the best. And
Yeah.
even actually something like Flickerous just resetting the region would kind of be annoying too.
That's a better case scenario, but now I fetch all my basics and I don't even get a basic off this. That's like really brutal. I mean, it's not that brutal because I have a lot of lands, but I would like to get the free land still, you know? Now I'm looking at this preload, I'm like, well, kind of hope I get to upgrade it. But I actually think they've been sitting on that preload forever, playing around days and then draw days. It's just like so like WTF, mate. And now this is like, okay, the actual issue is I think I have to use the braid to kill the preload, and I don't get to use the braid to kill the Sophie, and that's going to be a long-term issue. And there's only one braid in my deck. So it's kind of a disaster, right?
Yeah, your hand is forced at this point. There's nothing you can really do, and now any creature is really bad for you.
Yeah, so I guess this sort of works out. Like, I can put a creature in my hand, I can exile a creature, play a creature, and say go, and they'll probably spend mana equipping, then I get to gain some tempo back. But this is really kind of a losing battle, right? Because basically what has to happen is I have to kill literally every creature, and it's going to be horrible.
Yeah, I could see you drawing another region or something and stealing the game that way, but
yeah, I think you just have to.
Spot.
I think you have to do this, and it doesn't feel great. Actually, one way I could have won that didn't end up happening is if they preload on one, that means all of their plows are prisoned out from your regents. So that might have worked out. So
yeah, that's kind of cute actually. And yeah, I think you have to days here just playing around the possibility of land equip.
Yep. And I am just like, well, this is a forced play, even though it sucks. And I also like don't get value out of the surveil, but whatever. Don't think you're allowed to risk it because it just works out so poorly for you. One thing I didn't mention that I could have done on the turn when they went to equip with Sophie on Prelate is if you know you're going to achieve Delirium, you can let the equip happen, they attack, then you can abrade the Sophie and get Delirium and block.
Yeah.
But that was such low odds because I would have to had hit a creature off the Surveil. But maybe I should have just gone for it, you know?
Let's see, so it's something like a 1 in 3 chance or thereabouts, right?
1 in 3 is not very high.
I mean, it depends what you think your odds of winning are from that position anyway, right?
Right.
Like with the line that you're forced to take otherwise.
Actually, maybe that was better, and just hope to top deck a Regent or, Delirium to kill that. Like, if I saw a Regent, I probably wouldn't even surveil it away. I would probably just, like, take my 2 damage from Preload and cast a big idiot and hope it's good enough, right?
For sure, especially if it's locking out their own plows and paths.
Yeah, so now I'm convinced that I should have gone for the... It's not necessarily a greedy play, it's just, like, kind of a weird play to look at because my deck is mostly 1-drop spells, but I think maybe just killing the Sophie and then that means I don't have to kill literally every creature is probably a better winning plan than this. What's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think in retrospect that turn it could have been played a lot better. And sucks to suck. Well, now I have Delirium. And now I have all these cards that don't do anything. Forked mode is especially like kind of like taunting, right? So like the question is, do you keep that to flip a Delver? And I guess like my plan here was like, okay, I just hope that they don't have any creatures. But that's such a loose plan, right?
Doesn't seem like the odds are great.
How about removing all my creatures instead? Because the preload on 1 finally died. And
It's
now,
like, what? Unless the hand is just a bunch of ether vials or something, it's either removal or it's creatures, right? Or I guess the random one battle skull or something. So it's not like there are many combinations of cards they could have that are actually decent for you.
yeah, it's pretty bad all around. And now my goose is mostly cooked because they're still at 16, and I play you on for a little bit more, but like it really is untenable now. And honestly, I don't really think I got that unlucky. I just think my deck is not very well prepared for the matchup as currently constructed, which is fine, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, keep in mind, I'm not conceding it because there's a chance I get very lucky in that they don't draw anything, and I draw running regents or something like that. And this is literally a one and in match. But it basically has to be this turn now, I think. Alright, now I've had enough. It's kind of funny. Maybe I could have... No, because Regent no longer outraces Thalia, which is why I conceded. So la vie, right? Live by the Delver, die by the Delver. Anyways, that was 8 matches. I've went 0-1, 6-0, 0-1, which is... I'm sure you've been in that position. It's a roller coaster, right?
Yeah, I think that that's one of the leagues in my game is that if I do lose the first round, I kind of mentally check out a bit, and it kind of does flip around into an advantage where if I view the rest of the tournament as a free roll of sorts, then I don't get too frustrated if I like lose that last match at 6-1 or whatever.
I could hit Ragavan, then Ragavan / remove Thalia if the Ragavan's gone. But the Crocus was always untapped, right? I don't know how you manage that. I think I was basically drawing Mega Dead by that point. I can't even think. I think even if I stacked my deck, I would probably lose most of the time there, which is kind of funny to say. Like, when you're in the situation where a Vamp Tutor every turn doesn't help you, you know your goose is most likely cooked.
You talk a lot about cooking geese, Jarvis. Have you considered these Gilded Goose Witch's Oven decks?
Yeah. You know what I think of them? I love putting the goose in the oven and never seeing the goose again. Anyways, we got a few things to take care of. We have 3 subs, so you know what that means. We got some chests open. Yeah. So give me your best. All right. Give me some words on how Giver of Runes is good design.
I think it is, honestly. One of the issues with Mother of Runes is that past a certain point, you have to like take the shields down on the mother twice and then go after the creature that the mother was hoping to protect. Whereas, at least with Giver, it feels a lot more even. You know, you have to kill the Giver. It's a spell skite of sorts, but that's fine. And then this one does have actual advantages where it's not a strict downgrade. So the second toughness is really good. And during the Ren and 6 era, people were playing Giver of Runes over Mother of Runes, mainly for that, but also playing Engineer and some other reasons. And then also Protection from Colorless does come up more than you think, especially nowadays with a lot of constructs running around. And I remember using it to get Merit Lage through like Thopter tokens and stuff. So I think this card is, on balance, definitely worse than Mother of Runes, but it's still really good. And you can justify playing some copies of this if you want like extra versions of that effect. And sometimes this is going to be the one to play instead. So yeah, I think just a home run in every way, really.
Have you ever activated it to protect from Maze of Ith?
Ooh, I haven't, but I want to.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird niche interactions that come up with this card because protection from colorless obviously matters. Someone once had 2 Giver of Runes untapped and I had a K return in hand. I was really sad because if they knew how it worked, I basically wouldn't get to do very much. Whereas like Mother of Runes would have been significantly worse actually in that spot. Right. Sorry, give me like 2 sentences on this card.
I
I know, right?
I vaguely remember this one causing some hubbub and like competitive EDH or something. Couldn't tell you why. Don't particularly care.
Okay, all right, nice. All right, I have one more to open, right? Yeah. See what we got. Well, I think you can say a lot of words about this card because
Ooh,
it's
Shadow's Vote.
it,
Yeah, I like this one a lot. It has at various points been like the best sweeper in certainly Pioneer.
Yep.
But weirdly not really standard and not really other formats. It just happened to line up so that it happened to be really, really good. I think a big driving factor in that was Lurrus, actually.
Yep.
Where like that kept mana costs down to the point where this was guaranteed to hit everything, including Lurrus itself, and also all the stuff that Lurrus might want to return at some point. And then there were also some like 3-mana planeswalkers, Teferi, Narset floating around in the format, so just a good card there. And then Wasteland Strangler is, I mean, the whole like devoid processing thing is just such nonsense, and it's no surprise to me, right, that we've just had Modern Horizons 2 with 59 distinct mechanics, and Devoid was not one of them. And no one actually was sad about that, other than like the one person on Modo who loves Wasteland Strangler.
Who is that? Anton Numbers?
Numbers, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember their exact name, but every time I queued into them, they're literally playing like Collected Company, Flicker Wisp, Wasteland Strangler, sideboard Rest in Peace, and usually Eldrazi Displacer too. And one thing I learned about is you can process cards even with a rip out, and it'll just work forever. I did not know that, and I still think it's like a rules loophole or whatever.
That's weird.
All right. One last thing to go. All right. Give me your thoughts. Do you think Delver is too good? If you thought it was too good, what card would you go after with, and why?
Okay, Delver is 100% too good, just as it has been, at least every other iteration of Legacy for the past few years. Mm-hmm. And so we've had this whole like ban days discourse, and that's a shorthand for does something from Delver need to be banned? I think the answer clearly is yes, and I think it has to be something from the core Delver shell. And there are two main responses to that you hear that I think are both flawed. The first is that, well, Days is one of these iconic parts of Legacy. It's a pillar of the format, and you can't remove too many of those because then it just feels like a larger modern or something like that. I think that's true to some extent, and like if you are banning purely on the basis of what's too good or what's too popular or so on, then Brainstorm or frankly actually like Flutterstrand and friends would have been out of the building 20 years ago. Clearly we are making concessions so that those cards can stick around in the format, but that's what Legacy is to a lot of people, and so okay, I can see that to some extent. I just don't actually believe that people feel that way about Days. I know some people do, but when you ask like what cards are you most excited to play in the format, I think you hear answers like Brainstorm, Dark Ritual, Ancient Tomb, Natural Order, just Sneak Attacks, Show and Tell, really iconic cards from back in that era. I don't know if Days is one of them, honestly, for most people. I think that's a relatively rare reaction. And then the other response that you hear is, well, why ban Days? Let's ban the broken push threats that they keep printing, or let's just not do that instead. And the issue is that you expect to see push cards now, and I think you need some amount of that so that Legacy and other formats stay fresh and have some churn. And so what are you going to do? Are you literally going to ban every single one of those that comes along? Are we going to ban Channeler and Ragavan and, Murktide Regent and then whatever the one is in the D&D set in a few months? And also, bear in mind, before MH2 with Strixhaven, this deck was still too good. So are we banning Sprite Dragon at that point? Like, where does this stop, honestly? And when you look at how many cards on the ban list are there, I mean, honestly, most of them are there because of fetch lands, but the proximate cause for most of them being there is this Delver shell. And so I think removing some piece of that would let you to continue to add flashy, interesting cards to the format without worrying about this exact same thing happening over and over and over again. So then the question becomes what card that should be. I think Days would be a good ban. I think it, there's a massive play versus draw disparity. I think it pushes mana curves even lower in a format where, the expensive cards need the help and the cheap cards absolutely don't. And, okay, Days is not the thing that's stopping my pet Knight of the Reliquary deck from being viable or whatever, but like it does just really heavily constrain what you can do in the format, and I think it would be healthier without it there. My actual answer, I think, would be maybe Days as well, but maybe Ponder and Preordain, where like the fact that these blue shells they become so homogenized around that card draw because it is just the best thing you can be doing. And it makes sure that these blue decks have a level of consistency that is just unrivaled by anything in the format. And I think that would still mostly be true with just Brainstorm and some of the weaker options as well. But when you have Brainstorm and Ponder and Preordain, like it is your access to any particular card just so drastically outstrips anything else that's going on. To the point where it's silly. Like, you look at this Delver deck that we've got here. Just by changing, let's say, 2 cards in the sideboard, you can really add 5-10% to your equity in a certain matchup, and that's because you're so good at finding a copy of those cards that it like even better than like let's say the green decks with Zenith or whatever that are actively tutoring for their specific cards. Like you just have much better access to everything, and so. One concern that you hear is, oh, well, if we knock down Delver, then do we have to worry about stuff like Show and Tell or Doomsday or whatever? And the answer probably is yes, but if you handicap them as well by removing just some of the broken blue card draw, then I think that helps to cut them down to size as well. The other thing, too, is that when Paper Magic returns, Ponder is just... that card is a blight on Paper Magic because it forces you to play more shuffle effects, and it also shuffled itself, and it deals with this what's often hidden information on camera where people are like picking up some cards and peering at them and then looking back at their hand and then going back to it. And so it's dead air and then shuffling, which is more dead air. And it is not uncommon to see people just shuffle their deck 3 times in the same turn, and it's just like you can be the most talented commentator in the world, and you can't make that interesting. It just is...
What do you call it? The legacy loading screen?
Yeah. It's just so terrible. I guess that would be my answer is, start with Days Ponder, and then if people just slot Preordain back in and we're back to the same position, then maybe we have that discussion too. But I think that's where I would look more so than some of the other options.
Yeah. I conveniently did not have an opinion because, frankly, for me, I will just find whatever the best deck is and try to play it. And, like, that's okay. At one point, it was lands for me. I will remind y'all of that. Just in the current years that we live in, I don't think that is really the most broken strategy. And, that's okay. I can be a spike. And if they ban Ponder and Days, I'll just find something else to do. It might not be as clear what I should do, which is fine, but I'll find it.
Yeah, and look, I think there will always be a best deck, and if the issue is that, okay, Delver is what keeps the format in check, and if you don't have Delver, then it's a bunch of turn 1 combo decks and Ancient Tomb decks and Chalice of the Voids and so on, then I actually think the safeguards are there now to keep that stuff in check. Like, you have Force Negation, which I think is more obnoxious in this shell than in like the more controlling decks. You have Force of Vigor, you have the new cycle with like Endurance and Grief and so on. So I think you can more reliably interact with those decks and keep those in line. But like, you don't need Delver to keep the broken decks in check. Delver is the broken deck. Like, it's that is the issue. And it isn't exploitable in the same way where, if a graveyard deck is too good, then you can just take the nuclear option and play some ley lines, and that's going to boost you up a certain amount. There is literally no one card that does that with Delver. And even if you can find that, like I joke about shifting Ceratops or whatever, you can find individual cards that are good against Delver, but it's like, all right, well, you draw them less consistently than Delver does. You have to resolve them, which in many cases is easier said than done, through counter magic, wasteland, and so on. And then sometimes they just beat you anyway because their deck is that good. So what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, I will definitely agree with you that the deck is extremely consistent, and it probably will be always super consistent as long as nothing gets axed from it. And I'm not the DCI. Wait, DCI doesn't exist anymore, right?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, kind of sad. Although, if you ask a lot of newer players, they have no idea what that stands for anyways. I believe it's Duelist Convocation Invitational, right?
International, yeah.
International.
They went into this on the Saviors of Kamigawa, excuse me, receivables episode this week, and just Patrick phrased it so well. It's like, oh, going from your star high school athlete on the wrestling team to telling your mother that you've been banned from the Duelist Convocation International, like that's a real a glow down, if you will.
Yeah. Anyways, all joking aside, I'm actually excited to see where the format does end up. Like, there's still a lot of really good cards in MH2 besides all of the band talk. Like, I mean, can we find an Urza Saga shell that doesn't fold to Meltdown? Who can say? Maybe we can. Maybe we
think
can.
Probably, yeah. And it might just be that, like, yeah, if Delver takes you seriously and plays like a bunch of Meltdowns and Null-Rods, then there's really nothing you can do. But I think if you want to iterate, that's where you look. So I was thinking, is Painter with Urza Saga? Like, what does it do for that shell? Or there's got to be some busted LED Urza Saga deck in there too, with Echo or whatever. So still some stuff to explore, but there's much more room to explore just automatically by default if we take the action that needs to be taken with this deck.
And I will not be on either side of the debate. I will let other people argue about it, and I will just go back to drafting MH2 and let people argue about it, because that's what I do.
It sounds like you've been having a lot of fun with this format.
Oh yeah, I've done 4 drafts. I went 3-0, 2-1, 2-1, 3-0, and I have a disaster of a deck lined up for me to play at some point. And that's okay. Sometimes that happens. Lance won't Oyster, I think people underrate just tutoring up another Mox Diamond. Also, Retrofitter, Foundry, and Pirate Swellbomb are the ones I'm actually excited about. You could make a case for Expedition Map as well.
When I was playing Affinity in the prelim yesterday, I played against Band Miracles, and the Foundry just like KO'd their entire deck by themselves. I mulliganed to 5, and my draw was terrible, and I kept drawing like redundant Mox Opals, and I assumed I had just lost. And then over the course of 23 turns, I just won with the Foundry. I just decked it.
That's really funny.